Hello, Voices of Wrestling listener. Dave Ryan here. Have you ever wondered to yourself how many hidden gems are hidden away inside the last years of World Championship Wrestling? Have you ever asked yourself how many tenuous gags can be made about the name Mike Enos? And have you ever thought about what it sounds like for two Irishmen to interpret a very chaotic company through its B show? The answers to all this and more are just a click away. Check out Days of Thunder every second Thursday on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
What do you guys want to talk about?
You are listening to the Flagship Podcast with your hosts, Joe Lanza.
The lines are blurred between the living and the dead.
I'm like, what the fuck am I watching? Can I just watch a wrestling show ever in my life? I don't want the lines blurred between the living and the dead, Rich. I just want to watch guys wrestle.
Rich Crage.
He's wearing it.
He's wearing it. Shirt. It's a button-up shirt. It's blue and it's purple, and there are purple giraffes all over his fucking shirt. Apologize to me right now, everybody.
Rich, take that dub.
And we are live on the Flagship Podcast. I am Rich. He is Joe. Joe, what's happening? What a busy week this is going to be, man. We got a lot to talk about.
What a packed show. A lot to do.
A lot.
I did notice as I was listening to the intro there, believe it or not, we both whiffed on a major topic that somehow isn't on this endless scroll of a run sheet. And it's funny that neither one of us brought it up and the other didn't mention it. I can't believe this. And it just occurred to me now after the show has started.
Is it the National
Rich,
Wrestling Alliance pay-per-view?
You don't have hard times listed on the run sheet.
I misspoke by calling it a pay-per-view. Indeed, it is not. Or is it a pay-per-view? Or what is this thing? What is hard times?
Well, I will explain it to the audience. You know,
okay.
Last week, I had to explain to you and the listeners the new model that MLW is running under, right? And I clarified that for you.
And by the way,
so now it's time.
Locked in on MLW right now. We're head-to-head with Intimidation Games, so I'm sure we're going to lose a lot of our normal live listeners here. So for those of you listening a day later, because you were enthralled in the world of MLW, which is airing head-to-head with us on Triller TV powered by Fight. But I got it on the side screen. So any major happenings in the world of MLW, I will break in, Joe, and let you know what's happening.
Well, Mystico already defeated Rocky Romero for the MLW middleweight title.
All right, big one. That's a big one.
It's big breaking news already. So, no, Hard Times is, in fact, this weekend, NWA Hard Times. Rich, there are no more pay-per-views. There are no more NWA pay-per-views.
Right. We talked about that. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. So we would have to watch this over the course of multiple episodes of NWA Power streaming on the CW app, correct?
That's correct. There are two ways to watch NWA Hard Times. Number one, keep an eye on that CW app for episodes of Power. It'll show up in the multiple episodes. Number two is buy a ticket. So those are the only ways to see Hard Times, which...
Where are we in?
Unfortunately,
Dothan, Alabama. So I do not think I'm going to be getting out to Dothan, Alabama. I don't think I'll be at the whatever Civic Center in wherever, Alabama.
Wow. I'll tell you, AWA was just in Huntsville. AWA.
I was like, hold on a minute. Yeah. Vern's back. He's like, Ole's dead. I'm coming back. It's one more time for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that all sold that Ustinev tore the house down last night on the AWA show. First DJ Peterson. No, AEW was just in Huntsville, so maybe a good chance for a double dip. Someone goes to Dynamite one night.
Yeah, Alabama's this epicenter of professional wrestling this weekend.
Over to Dothan for Hard Knocks, right? I have no idea how close those cities are to one another.
Hard times.
Yeah, whatever the fuck. I have no idea how close those cities are to one another. Let's see. Huntsville. Since there's not enough to do tonight, let's look up.
Let's Google map. Let's Google map Huntsville to Dothan.
To Dothan.
Dothan? You going with Dothan
It's,
or Dotham? I don't know how to pronounce it, but let's go with Dothan.
Those two cities, Rich, could not possibly be further away from each other in the same state. Those might be the two furthest cities from one another in the state of Alabama.
Yeah. Oh, that is one border to the other. You are from the Tennessee border all the way to the Florida-Georgia border.
That is essentially a different culture.
Yes.
If you go from one city to the other.
Having been to both those areas, oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a 4-hour and 41-minute drive. So maybe not the double dip that people think it is. But
and then you can scoot on over to Greensboro for the AEW Revolution show, which I think should only add another, let's see, how many hours? Another 7 hours to your drive. You can go to Greensboro then and do the so a quick little 13 hours of driving, but think of all the great professional wrestling you'll have seen in those 13 hours. So certainly worth it. If you I'm coming up with 8.5 hours from Dothan to Greensboro. Let's see here. Well, okay, so I was counting Huntsville to Oh, I see. Okay. I had it in the wrong order.
Yeah, because Huntsville was AEW. So
there we go. Okay, so right. So you got to go from Huntsville to Dothan to then Greensboro, and 13 hours of driving. Yeah, 8 hours to get from
8.5 hours from Dothan to Greensboro. Yeah. Do you think that there's over under the total number of people who attended both Dynamite in Huntsville and Hard Times in Dothan? The over under is 2.5.
Under.
You take the under.
I'm taking the under. I think there's
essentially saying no one.
No one. I think there's. Well, if the line was 2.5, I would say people doing the double dip of Dynamite to Greensboro. I would put that at
that'd be a healthy number, I think.
I'd say there's double digits people doing that. Now, the double dip, am I going much higher than 20? Probably not, but I think there's probably a couple people that have just kind of said, hey, you know what? Screw it. Let's do it. Let's go. Making a quick little stop. 6 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever we said, south to go to Dothan for NWA Hard Times with Kenzie Page versus Natalia Markova for your NWA World Women's Championship. 3 matches, by the way, announced for the show, happening in a couple days. I would put that at 0. I don't think anybody's doing that.
Not one fan.
I don't think one person is doing that. No.
Okay, fair enough. I think Huntsville, Greensboro, there might be some, not in the hardcore freakazoid days of pre-pandemic. There was a lot of traveling there was probably tons of AEW fans who would go to the Go Home Dynamite and then the pay-per-view. There's probably less of that now. There's less people overall buying tickets. But the Greensboro show is a huge show. I mean, that's up to over 16,000?
Oh, for sure. That's one that I had a little bit of FOMO about, too. When they first announced it, I was like, man, that'd be a fun show to go to. And I made the mistake of looking at plane tickets, and they were super affordable. And I was like, shit, I should go to that thing. But I always have this thing that we talk about where it's it's more advantageous for me just to be home for an AEW pay-per-view to do the instant reaction or whatever. And yeah, sure, we could do it an hour later. And we do that with the shows in Chicago, and it's fine. But part of me is I'm looking at all that, and I'm like, it's probably just easier to stay at home, hit record, hit go live, 10 minutes after the show, and it's just a little bit easier to do all that. Not have to worry about hotel Wi-Fi or any shit like that. The Chicago shows are fine because I just have to book it out of the the building and get home, and then I'm back in having the normal internet with my same setup. Doing this thing and trying to do this in a hotel or something like that would just be, I don't know, it makes me nervous. So eventually I decided not to. But there were a couple times where I looked at tickets and I had tickets in the cart thinking, man, this would be a once in a lifetime opportunity. I should probably do this. But ultimately I'm stuck doing instant reaction live with you on Sunday, but that's fine. That's a better way to watch the show anyway.
Exclusively on the $10 tier.
Absolutely. Flagship Patreon. Yeah, flagshippatreon.com.
Whatever the fuck it is here. The latest update from the Wrestle Ticks is 16,084 tickets distributed. There were 46 tickets available as of yesterday, as of about 24 hours ago on the dot. So they just keep on adding rose to that. Now, Big Business, Rich, in Boston. An update just came out on that about an hour ago. Once again, on the Wrestle Ticks. That's the Money debut.
Mm-hmm.
That's up to 6682. with a current setup of $75.63, and they have lowered the ticket prices. The cheapest tickets have gone from $51 to $26.
Ooh.
So that's all the way, that's upstairs, back row.
Sure.
But yeah, they're at this point just trying to sell off whatever they've got left, about 800 tickets or so. That's going to be, the biggest TV that they've done, because what was it, Arizona a couple weeks ago? They had like over 5,000 or something like that. And that'll be this will be the biggest non-pay-per-view number this year and in some time. But, we'll see where the number settles. They were there for, Blood and Guts last
Blood and
year,
Guts,
and they did a shade under 9,000.
I was going to say somewhere in that 9. I thought it was in the 9, but it was a shade under 9.
89.56.
Okay,
call
real
it
close.
9,000.
Real close.
Call it
Yeah,
9,000.
we'll call it 9. I think on the show we just said we're just going to declare that 9 because that's pretty damn close. So.
That was in July. They're selling about 100 tickets a day for this big business show. I don't think it's going to get to that 89.56 number because there's a little under 2 weeks left. But that's going to be a healthy television number by AEW standards. But of course, it's a number right in between where you can definitively declare Money a huge success or a bomb. Of course. So it's a discourse number.
It's the exact.
It's a discourse number.
Right. It's for the smooth brained, weirdos would say, it's not 10,000. I thought it's unbelievable. WWE just had 11,000 for Raw. You know what I mean? And they didn't have to debut anybody. So there's those people. The people that want to say, well, look at how, like you just said there, one of the biggest houses they've had for a TV show, a non-pay-per-view show ever. So that's, that's a feather in those people's cap. So it's just going to create the absolute worst discourse as per usual. So, exactly where we all wanted it to be, in the most annoying spot possible for everybody to be as annoying as possible with it.
Yeah, exactly. So, just how we were expecting to kick off a loaded show. Travel plans from Dothan to Greensboro.
We're told we actually have a resident. Ninja 650R says, never thought I'd hear my hometown on the flagship. It's Dothan. Dothan is how you pronounce that. Doesn't make sense.
Dothan, yeah.
Dothan.
Dothan. Well,
Yeah. NWA Hard Times. So we just did more promotion than I think they have because it's coming up this weekend. So Knox and Murdoch versus the Southern Six, Alex Taylor and Kerry Morton. La Rosa Negra and Ruthie J versus Rekka Theka and Tiffany Nieves. And Kenzie Page defending the NWA World Women's Championship against Natalia Markova. NWA Hard Times 2024. Dothan, Alabama. Dothan Civic Center. March 2nd. Get your tickets while they last. Get their tickets.
Yeah.
Don't miss out. Buy your tickets now on wherever NWA sells their tickets.
Well, no. Can you? When is the show? Isn't that
it's
tomorrow?
March 2nd.
I guess
March
you
2nd,
can.
Saturday. You still
Tell that guy in the chat to go.
Yeah, he better go. We need a live report. We need a live report from NWA Hard Times. Because the last time we knew somebody that went to an NWA show, they just said, worst show I've ever been to, worst show I've ever been to. I don't even want to talk about it. And then they never answered any of my questions about it. It's like they had PTSD. They were like, just know it was bad and I don't want to talk about it. Like they've been through war. They just said I don't really want to talk about it. Like I imagine through, breathing heavily, just like, okay, I just got back from the NWA show. Rich, it's horrible. It's so bad. Like, tell me about it. No, I can't. And then I never heard anything about it. So I don't know what happened. And nobody knows. Remember we said that spoilers didn't come out. Results didn't come out. It was like these shows happened in an abyss. Nobody knew about them. Nobody had spoilers. Nobody had photos. Nobody knew anything until they aired on the CW app. And even that, I don't think anybody knows about it. But TixR.com has the NWA Hard Times.
Whatever they're getting
tickets.
paid by the CW, and they undoubtedly are getting paid. I know people have their jokes, but they're not going to shut down their pay-per-view business and shut down their YouTube business for $0. They're obviously getting paid by the CW, and they're obviously being paid more than they were generating on their own pre-CW. But whatever that amount is, it's certainly not being reinvested in the roster. We do know that much. That is one sorry-ass roster that they're rolling out there.
Card has 3 matches on
It's,
it. So I don't know if because NWA, what day does it air during the week on the CW app? Today, right?
fucking know. I have no idea.
Is it today?
Thursdays?
I don't know. Impact's on Thursday. There's a lot on Thursdays. Everyone's coming for our spot here on the flagship. We got ML Dub, TNA, obviously running on Thursdays. Yeah, I don't know when the NWA is on the CW app, but yeah.
Let's see. NWA Power, CW app.
I want to say it's Thursday, but it might be Wednesday. Tuesday. It's Tuesday, isn't it?
I just took your word for it. I was like, okay, good. Deal.
No, I feel confident about Tuesdays. I think it's Tuesdays.
This shouldn't be as hard to find as it.
Look,
Why do these companies make
Let's
it
go
so
with
hard?
Tuesday. Let's just fucking say Tuesday. Nobody cares. No one calls on it.
No, but now I have to know. Stream NWA Power in the CW app. All right, let me click that button. It looks like you're using an ad blocker. Oh, come on, CW.
They want their money. They're paying
I'm not disabling.
They're paying NWA X amount of dollars. They need to make their X amount of dollars back, Joe. Enough for NWA to get rid of their YouTube channel and pay-per-views. So you know what? Turn off your ad blocker and give Billy some money.
I'm not turning it off. Where's the swink? He'll know what day it is.
I don't think he's not in the chat right now. We have Z is telling us Tuesday. Z is with me on Tuesdays, so I think it's Tuesday.
Yeah. All right, well, it's Tuesdays then. Okay. Yeah. Z knows what he's talking about. All right, so now that we got that settled,
we've done our NWA topic for the week, so there you go.
There goes a half hour.
Yeah, as per usual. But yeah, we got an absolute shit ton to talk about this week, so we don't want to mess around with too much more time here. We of course have two major deaths in the world of pro wrestling that we're going to talk about here very shortly. Ole Anderson and Virgil, Vincent, Mike Jones, whatever you want to call him. He, passed away as well as Ole. So we're going to talk about both those guys. So huge bios coming up here very, very soon. An in-depth preview of AEW Revolution coming up this weekend. As we mentioned, we are going to be going live immediately following the show on Sunday night. Instant reaction live on the $10 tier, flagshippatreon.com. So make sure you subscribe for that. We always tell people, just subscribe now. There's a lot of people that will subscribe the night of, an hour before we go live, when we go live, all that sort of stuff. Just subscribe now. Just do it now. You're going to get some bonus audio. You're going to get everything else we've did. So, throughout the weekend, you can listen to the newest episode of Brett versus Owen. You can listen to your Thursday Dynamite review. You can listen to your recap of the Wrestling Observer Awards, my Elimination Chamber instant-ish reaction. So there's a lot of stuff available right now on the Patreon. So if any of that sort of stuff interests you, plus you're going to get the AEW Revolution instant reaction live, you may as well just subscribe right now. So flagshippatreon.com, $10 tier for that. We'll also discuss on this night's show Sting's final match. Of course, we'll also discuss that on Sunday. CML wrestlers are losing their visas. We'll tell you which ones and what happened and how this all went down. Some fallout from WWE's Elimination Chamber. We're not going to go into too in-depth because I did do a instant-ish reaction the day of the show for Elimination Chamber. But, Joe, we need your thoughts on Elimination Chamber. We also have Maxxine Duprigate. Joe, is it okay to boo wrestlers? We are going to talk about that later in the show and get your reaction and your thoughts because maybe, you know what? You might be surprised. Maybe Joe thinks booing is bad, and you should be nice to people who are trying their hardest. But we'll find out in a little bit here what Joe's thoughts are on Maxxine Duprigate. We will also talk about the Wrestling Observer results, Wrestling Observer Award results. You did a show kind of breaking those down. I'll give my thoughts about the results and some other stuff that we maybe dug into and want to discuss about the Observer Awards results. New Japan, New Beginning in Sapporo, Night 1 and Night 2. We'll do reviews of those shows as well as talk about some bizarre booking in New Japan Pro Wrestling, as well as some of their upcoming shows coming up, including the anniversary show, 52nd anniversary show, New Japan Cup, and a few other things, as well as Hiroshi Tanahashi going to miss time with an injury. MLW Intimidation Games going on live right now. We will get you kind of ready for that if you want to watch it later in the night or this weekend. And then we'll start here as not really the nicest way to start, but something that we have to kind of keep an eye on as the story is going to continue to fester and continue to be top of mind for us and should be top of mind for everybody in the pro wrestling world. And that's latest accusations against Vince McMahon and the World Wrestling Federation, WWE. First, there was two. I'll start with Nick Dinsmore. Obviously, the former Eugene went onto his Eugene Behind the Scenes podcast and alleges that former senior director of talent relations at WWE, Mark Carano, trapped his then or his future wife, I guess then just fiance. I forget if it was fiance or girlfriend at the time, but his future wife in a bathroom at I believe a Texas Roadhouse, right? Or was it a Longhorn Steakhouse? I forget where it was. It was some insert chain steakhouse there. Not relevant whatsoever to the story. To make a pass at her, Dinsmore claims that he let WWE HR know about the incident in 2015, but is not sure that anything was done about it. So he didn't get into that many more details. Essentially, just that Mark Carrano did this to his wife at a restaurant, tried to make a pass at her. Dinsmore said something. WHR said, okay, yeah, sure, we're listening. Yeah, okay. And then he's not sure that anything ever happened with it.
More than just made a pass at her, allegedly followed her into a bathroom and then used his foot to block the exit and was trying to force himself on her, was the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second facet of it is what you noted. Essentially, what it sounded to me is then he was released from his job as a coach. And in what was either the conversation where he was terminated or his exit interview, one or the other, he reported the incident, and he knows that there was an HR person on the call because it was either an exit interview or him being terminated. So generally, you'll have the person who's terminating you and or an HR person if that's not the person who's firing you, right? That's usually how it works. So he knows there was an HR person on the call in addition to whoever his superior was who let him go. He reported the incident, and Carrano was employed. He's not employed anymore, but he was employed long after that. So obviously nothing was, to his knowledge at least, was done about it. So that was new incident number one.
Right. Well, you know what's funny about this? You know what's funny about this? It's not that new of an incident. And I remember this story happening a couple years ago, and I remember people talking about it, and then people, as usual, just ignored it or moved on or just did whatever. But in doing research for this story, this most recent one, I came across this article from April 2021, and this was when Mark Carrano was, I believe, released from WWE or fired or whatever. I forget exactly how he got terminated or whatever, but he was former head of talent relations at that time, and there was an allegation that he stole title belts from the company, that he just decided to put them in his bag or something and kind of walk away or do whatever. And Nick Dinsmore, and the tweet is still up, April 24th, 2021. It says, quote, "Hey Pinky, where does he store his sexual assault allegations?" And then he sent another tweet that said, "I think it might just be the tip of the iceberg of creepiness."
Right.
So he's kind of, he did sort of make a mention of it all those many years ago now about Mark Carrano, and people just kind of forgot about it, myself included. And now that he's, put his actual name on it and given the actual allegations there, it makes those tweets from 2021 make a little bit more sense there from Dinsmore, who at that point had left the company. It was no longer, employed by them.
2015 was when all of this went down.
Yeah, right.
So there you go. So that's when I say new incident, just new to this current wave of with the lawsuit against the company and against Vince. Another incident has resurfaced, maybe is a better way to put it. Another resurfaced incident.
Well, I completely forgot about that the previous time too. I don't think I gave any attention to it or any. So I'm as guilty as everybody else about not really paying attention when Dinsmore mentioned that. But the next one that came out this week was Nick Kiniski, who was former wrestler, WWE wrestler. He appeared on the Pollock and Thurston show, and for the first time publicly revealed that he was propositioned by a WWF official, later named as Terry Garvin, who. Very famous name for sexual abuse allegations throughout the 80s and 90s in the WWF. And so he was propositioned by WWF official Terry Garvin. Very similar to the Jim Power story we talked about a couple weeks ago or maybe last week. And Kiniski says that he alerted Vince McMahon to what happened. Kiniski alleges that McMahon said, "Oh, okay, I'll deal with it." And Vince obviously did not deal with it. Garvin continued to work with the company into the 90s. One of the central figures of WWF's 1992 sexual assault or sexual misconduct allegations. And Kiniski was, fired or left the company very soon.
No, he left. So here's the Kiniski deal. So he's obviously the son of former NWA World Champion Gene Kiniski.
Right.
Okay, this is Nick Kiniski. He had a brother, Kelly Kiniski, who was also in wrestling. So he came into the company. He wasn't there long, maybe about a year, I think, from if you don't mind, can you pull it up or no?
Yeah.
Pull it up if you... I think from mid 85 to mid 86 or mid 86 to mid 87, but I think it was 85 to 86.
I think you're right, but I'm pretty sure it was 85 is when he started, and I don't know how long he lasted in the WWE.
He lasted into 86. He was there about a year. So
actually, he was there May of 87 was actually his last match.
So it was 86 to 87, not 85 to 86.
Correct. So yes, he starts August of 86 and lasts all the way through May of 87.
Right. So a little less than a year from 86 to 87. And very similar story that we've heard over the years from a number of wrestlers. Jim Powers, Barry Orton tells a similar story, all about Terry Garvin. Some people allege that Pat Patterson pulled the same routine, which was, listen, you let me perform oral sex on you, and we've got a big push coming your way. And that's what he claims he was told by Terry Garvin. Turned him down, tried to joke about it, like, Terry, that's not my thing. I'm not interested. But says every time he ran into Terry Garvin, Garvin would bring it back up, in a jovial, joking manner, but, essentially trying to coerce him to do it, and Kiniski never went for it. And, it came with the same promise of a push. He basically told him, look, I need you to lose a few pounds, and we've got a push coming for you. And he lost the weight, and the push never came. And the more he rejected Garvin's advances, in fact, the less he was being pushed at that point. So he kind of saw the writing on the wall and understood what was going on. And that's when he went to report it to Vince. And Vince gave him the line, "Oh, okay, I'll deal with it." And when he, at the next set of tapings and through the next go round of the circuit, when he saw his push wasn't improving and nothing was really done about it, and Garvin was still pestering him about it and making jokes, that's when he said, you know what, I don't need this shit. And he quit. He was not fired.
Okay. So he quit.
He gave his notice to Vince, and Vince told him, you know what, I don't even need you to finish up. And that was that. And that was the end of him. And in fact, John Pollock, did some research on the house shows, and there were a number of house shows where on the history of WWF site, where they do a really good job, where it says that the Nick Kiniski versus, whoever match was scheduled but never happened. Because obviously he had been, which lines up with his story. That
makes perfect sense then.
Yeah, and if Vince said, no, just hit the bricks now. So these advertised matches never happened because he quit / was told to go home. So I know he did pop up in the AWA briefly after that. Mm-hmm. But then that was it for his career as a pro wrestler. And
he's done by January '88. He's completely done.
Yeah, he walked away, and he told Pollock and Thurston that he really stopped following the business closely. He didn't know a ton about the scandals that would come a few years later with Mel Phillips and Terry Garvin. He wasn't totally up to speed on all of that because he had just left wrestling behind, and he opened up a couple of bars where he lives, I believe, in the Pacific Northwest area. And that was it for him. Now, he did say, and Greg Oliver, I think, even tweeted this. He had told Greg Oliver this story around 2006, and he had told other people as well. But he didn't want to go public with these allegations or anything because he didn't want to come across as the disgruntled guy who never made it.
Right. Which is a very easy way to paint him, as, he was no good. Like literally Vince, did when other employees, would say, hey, I was propositioned by members of your staff. And Vince would then retort, well, you weren't very good at your job. That has happened on live national television before. So,
and I guess he didn't even want people to think that he was just some bitter guy who was making up stories to explain why he never made it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Especially at that time. For people that weren't around during this period of the mid 2000s, sorry to cut you off there, but that was like the epicenter of, and we're going to talk about Ole Anderson here in a little bit. That was like ground zero, the top tier, like old wrestlers doing shoot interviews and just being bitter about the business. That was like the industry at that time. So I think a lot of guys were worried about how they would come across in that era of being, oh, here's just another bitter old wrestler who, got passed over or the business passed them by or whatever. So here he is doing a shoot interview, bitching and moaning and complaining and making up stuff. I mean, goddamn, Nails, you know, that one still gets laughed about, of Nails saying that, hey, Vince McMahon, you know, sexually assaulted me, and people still laugh him off and, oh my God, look at this idiot here. And it's like, you know, I don't know, maybe, but like, especially in that, you know, mid 2000s, I think there was a lot of guys that maybe were a little worried about what the reputations were going to be like. And maybe he was one of those too, that just realized that that's how he would get painted if that's when he brought it up.
So there's another key component to this. Number one, Garvin propositioned him and then continued to pressure him to the point where the man quit. Okay, that's number one. Number two, he reported it to Vince McMahon. That's number two. Number three, and good job by John and Brandon here, they then played a clip of Vince McMahon from Larry King Live, from one of his appearances on Larry King Live many years later, where Larry King asks Vince McMahon directly, have you been privy to, or are you aware of, or did anybody ever report this sexual misconduct to you, this during the scandals involving Terry Garvin? And Vince, you know, and I'm paraphrasing, basically says, no one ever reported anything like that to me. It would be taken care of and handled. Now, if there's homosexuals in the locker room, of course there's going to be some horseplay. I think he said something like that, which is preposterous. Why would there be horseplay? Simply because there's...
You know those homosexual. Oh, my God.
You know the gays and their horseplay, you know, and those wacky gays, you know.
Always getting into mischief backstage in my locker room. Oh, my God. I'll burn this company to the ground. God.
Like Silvio Dante on The Sopranos, where they find out Vito's gay. He's like, well, you know, they're always sneaking around. It makes them devious. You know, like, it's ridiculous what we're talking about. You know, it's so anyway, the point of playing the clip was that here we have Vince some 5, 6, 7 years later, whatever that Larry King appearance was, denying that anyone had ever reported that kind of thing to him, which, if you would to believe Nick Kiniski, is just a flat out lie, because he just told everybody that he reported it to Vince. So, you know, obviously Vince doesn't come off credible at all in the clip, and Kiniski comes off more than credible. I mean, this is a guy who simply left wrestling behind, moved on with his life, has had a successful life, didn't want to report it because he didn't want to deal with the nonsense of being called a liar and someone who was bitter. And here's two more good points that relate back to the conversations we've been having every week. Number one, you keep talking about how it's wrestling related media that need to stay on top of things here.
Yep.
And here's Post and Brandon Thurston in conjunction, doing a good job and staying on top of it and scoring a big interview and keeping the flame alive on the story within wrestling media. Okay. So that's number one. Good job out of them. And it's an excellent interview, and I recommend everybody watch it. Number two is something that I've been beating the drum on and talking about. Kiniski mentions in the interview that, well, Pollock or one or the other brings up the Paul Roma interview that resurfaced with Jim Powers. And Kiniski mentioned that he did see it, and that's what emboldened him to come out and tell a story. And this is exactly what I've been talking about over the last few weeks. I feel like there's a lot more to come, because the more these stories come out, the more people feel emboldened or safe or just brave enough to tell these stories that they've been keeping to themselves.
Well, you're not alone.
Or just to close
I
confidence.
mean? You're not alone now. It's like, oh, wait, okay, you had a very similar experience to me. Okay, well, now I feel more. I don't feel like I'm the one lone voice here that like Kiniski didn't want to come out in the mid 2000s, feeling like he might be the only guy on an island or whatever.
Since
now
1987, he's not wanted to say anything publicly. But then he sees Paul Roma do the news rounds or go on that news show, and then his other interview resurface, and he flat out admitted that that's why he came forward and decided to finally go public with his story. And that's exactly what I've been talking about the last few weeks. And I don't think he's going to be the last one, and I don't think he's going to be the only one. And I think that more of these skeletons are going to emerge from the WWE closet as a result. So, here's two more stories that have resurfaced.
That's why the conversation needs to continue, and the conversation and people need just talk to people, ask people. That the more that we keep this story alive, like, yeah, more people might be privy to come out or feel not necessarily obligated to come out, but feel more safe coming out with their stories and mentioning what happened to them. And this is how things happen. You know what I mean? They don't happen by sitting and waiting around. Oh, I'm sure somebody will do something. Well, no, sometimes you got to go out and do it on your own. So yeah, credit to definitely credit to Pollock and Thurston for doing that. And I know they had John Arezzi on this week as well, and Arezzi did a great job with the 90s. The original
Arezzi
scandals.
was one of the only people covering the story to begin. It was Arezzi,
Right.
Dave Meltzer. It was a little early for Wade.
Muchnick was doing a lot then too, right?
Muchnick. Well, which Muchnick? Irv Muchnick or Phil Muchnick?
No.
Yeah, I mean
Phil, right? All right. I forget
Phil
at that time.
Irv Muchnick is the one related to Sam who wrote the Wrestling Babylon book.
Right,
Phil Muchnick is the New York media reporter who's always had. I was gonna say has always had a hard on for Vince. Bad turn of phrase in this scenario, but has always had it out for Vince, and has hated Vince McMahon for many years. So and they spell their names differently as well. But yeah, that whole gang from that era, and Arezzi was a big part of that. Arezzi was on the Donahue show with Meltzer and superstar Billy Graham and Bruno Sammartino, that infamous Donahue episode where they sniffed out the plan that Vince had concocted with Tom Cole, where he had Cole sitting next to, I believe, Elizabeth, and maybe Linda too. I can't remember if Linda was there as well. But the idea was that at some point someone was going to bring up Tom Cole, and then Vince's big gotcha moment was going to be that Tom Cole was going to stand up with Elizabeth and defend Vince. But they sniffed it out. I think it was Barry Orton, in fact, who said, "Hey, look, I've been out of contact with Tom Cole, and it's a little suspicious." And then he warned everybody else, Bruno and Graham and Meltzer, don't bring up Tom Cole because I think something's up here. And it was. And McMahon was setting a trap basically on the Donahue show, and it didn't work because nobody brought him up, so there was no reason for him to be addressed. But yeah, so one other thing that I think, Rich, what do Nick Kiniski, Jim Powers, Barry Orton, what do they all have in common aside from being propositioned by Terry Garvin? The obvious thing is they're three guys who never got pushed.
It looked like they all had potential and were getting to a certain point, and then it felt like their push got cut off very quickly, and then they were out of the company very soon thereafter without ever getting pushed.
Three guys who never got pushed, and very shortly thereafter were gone. So you could draw your own conclusions, and Kiniski, Roma, they all maintain that there were some guys who did go along with Garvin and whoever else and allowed this to happen. And maybe those people were pushed as a result. Maybe the promised pushes did come for those guys, and it's what a terrible position to be put in.
Absolutely.
It's
and
two more stories that speak to the company culture that's been there for decades and decades and decades.
And as I believe Kiniski told it, and I forget if it's similar-ish stories to what Powers and what Barry had said about it too, was essentially that Garvin would bring it up as, look, you don't have to. You can. I think Kiniski even says, like, Garvin says, hey, you can look at a Playboy or whatever, man. Just let me do it, and then do whatever you want to do. Focus on whatever you want to focus on, but let me do it. And
right.
It's nothing. It's nothing more than that. But you gotta let me do what I need to do. So weird stuff, and it's just like, God, it's fucking gross, and it's just, it's just awful that anybody was put in that situation. And you'd imagine if, hey, do you want to get pushed and become a star in this industry, or do you not want to become a star in this industry? And we can fire you and de-push you. Like, you can see how a lot of people are put in this awful, horrific situation, and whether this. I don't think this ended in 1987. I don't think this ended in 1991. I don't think this ended. What we're finding out is that this might not have ended ever. Until very, very recently did this sort of company culture end, and it's very disturbing. And the fact that all three of these guys' stories are pretty much exactly the same with the exact same person I mean, that's a lot of, that's very,
and
very.
there's probably a bunch more.
Oh, there's probably a bunch more. I just mean it's very coordinated. If you're like, oh, they're lying or whatever, very coordinated lying from a guy who lives in the Pacific Northwest and has nothing to do with wrestling anymore. and Jim Power, these guys, these aren't three of lifelong best friends, Barry O, Jim Powers, and Nick Kiniski, but their stories are exactly the same.
Well, as I noted last week, Paul Roma and Jim Powers don't even like each other.
Right.
And Paul Roma's co-signing the story. Like, yeah, that happened. And because Paul Roma, and this is probably the wrong attitude for him to have, he was annoyed that Jim Powers went and complained to the agents about it. He's like, you're killing our push.
Right, you're killing our push.
Which, because now we're dead. Now,
But again, think of the situation you're put in. Think of the situation you're put in, and Paul's
Roma
like,
saw what happened.
Come on. You fucked our spot up.
Yeah, because Roma saw what happened to Nick Kiniski and everybody else.
Right. Oh, God.
And you have to think, I mean, it was either, I get mixed up now because there's been so many lately, but either it was Kiniski, Roma, or Powers, one of the three, where I heard them say, like, look, there were other guys who were asked to participate in this who just threw their hands and quit, and just walked out and they got the fuck out of there, and it just makes you wonder. I mean, the litany of wrestlers who would come in and out of the company during that time period in the mid 80s through the mid 80s through the early 90s that just would come in and disappear. And it would be, obviously irresponsible to just start throwing names out there.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I mean, that this happened to many more of these guys. A lot of them just quit out of nowhere or didn't, like Kiniski, he was smart enough to understand his booking patterns not only didn't change, but in his mind got worse after he was saying no. And then he said the final straw was something about, he was booked on a show and then taken off a show, and it happened to be a show Hulk Hogan was on. And those were the biggest payoffs because those were the biggest houses. And then he's like, not only is my push not coming, I think I'm being punished.
Right. Now you're not letting me get paid. I was supposed to work this show that was going to make money, and now you're taking me off this show. So now I'm not being paid as well.
Yeah. So that, he said, was his final straw, and he seemed to remember it as being in California loop. He kept mentioning Los Angeles, and he said maybe the Cow Palace. Now, I looked up his results, and it didn't really match up. But look, this is like 40 years ago. It's.
And clearly not a guy who's been thinking about wrestling all the time. He's like one of those pro wrestling lifer dudes. They can recall stuff, very perfectly and do it. But a guy who's been out of it for that long, I'm sure the details are sketchy, in terms of what town or whatever.
Hey, look, I mean, my career has taken me to towns all over the place. And if you ask me what specific town I was in when I, had to terminate a certain employee and I have to try to remember I wouldn't fucking know where I was 10 years ago. This was 40 years ago. So, when it comes to like hazy memory and stuff, I don't think anyone should go down that route if he's got some of his cities mixed up or whatnot, which again, Pollock found the end of his run and found a bunch of shows where it said his match was scheduled but didn't take place, which lines up with the idea that it was a quick exit without a notice. So that's the latest on the WWE lawsuit.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. All right, so let's move on to you know what? Hey, for the first time ever, we got a perfect transition from the WWE accusations right to the death of Ole Anderson. So Ole Anderson, Alan Rogowski, I believe is how you pronounce his actual name, but everybody that listening to this knows him as Ole Anderson. Passed away earlier this week. A legendary career in pro wrestling, both as a booker, as a wrestler, as a figure, even after his days wrestling. An all-time asshole, by the way, for the record, one of the all-time pro wrestling assholes. I know Dave has mentioned a bunch of stories, and he's got a bunch more that he's going to do in the Wrestling Observer this week, but well known by pretty much everybody as like the pro wrestling asshole. I think one guy said he'd make Satan miserable, like just
a little cantankerous,
It's his rep was definitely that. Yeah, this guy's a fucking asshole, but he
grouchy, little,
Just Ole. You know what I mean? A lot of people just would say Ole, and then, wrestlers go, yeah. It was one word, and it said enough. But passed away at 81 earlier this week. And, just an unbelievably legendary and unbelievably long pro wrestling career. And I don't even know. I mean, Joe, where the hell do we even start with this? Trying to break down the career of Ole. Yeah.
The original Rock, right? Al the Rock Rogowski.
He can't call himself that anymore. The Rock now owns all of the rights per the WWE earnings call. The Rock is the only man that can call himself The Rock anymore.
How would that work? Because obviously this guy was The Rock decades before Dwayne Johnson was The Rock. Don Morocco was The Rock a couple of decades before, or 1 decade before Dwayne Johnson was The Rock.
Tim Raines.
Right? So he owns The Rock for his own usage, right? But he wouldn't be able to stop, like, I don't even know what scenario it would come up with, but can WWE market a Don The Rock Morocco biography on Peacock? Of course they can, right? Like, he's got the usage for.
I don't know.
Himself.
I'd have to dig in a little bit. I mean, I am now waiting with bated breath for the Peacock documentary about Don The Rock Morocco. That sounds awesome. Is that coming or what? Is that real?
The Don Morocco Rock era was just when he was juiced up post babyface turn.
Fuck yeah, he was awesome. He was so juiced up, and they're back. A&E's doing their, they have their WWE content. And I think they just restarted that, the WWE Rivals and, Decades and all that sort of stuff. So good opportunity for them to dust off all the Don The Rock Morocco footage. That's how I always knew him, because when I really started watching wrestling, he was The Rock. So I don't really know of Don Morocco pre The Rock. Like, you know what I mean? Like that.
Magnificent
Morocco.
Yeah,
I really don't. Yeah, I like later I would find out about the Magnificent Morocco days. But to me, he's always Don The Rock Morocco, and he's just, fucking a brick shit house like you've never seen before.
I've said it many times. I have never seen a body transformation quite like his. He was just. How old was he in 1988? Let's look that up, bro.
Don Morocco.
What year was Don Morocco born?
I got you here. Don Morocco.
Had to be about 40.
He was born in 1949. So what year did you want?
He's 88. So he was 39.
Yeah, he was 39. That's quite a lot of mass to add in at age 39.
At 39, he went from a guy who early in his career, he had like a lean athletic build, but was clearly someone who, if he wasn't careful, was going to get a little flabby. And then that's what happened as his career moved along. He was never a guy who was in awful shape, but he was never a guy who was a tremendous physical specimen either.
He kind of looked like a refrigerator. He was kind of shaped like a refrigerator for a little bit, like kind of light shoulders, big in the waist or whatever. Just exactly like you're describing. Kind of had like a little bit of like a Stan Hansen body, a little bit of a Genichiro Tenryu body, like that sort of.
He in the early his strongest push in the early 80s, the stuff with Snuka and all of that. He was a great worker. I mean, Morocco was outstanding. And then he started to get lazy, and during the Hulkamania era. And then did he die or did Ole Anderson die? But then he did the babyface turn and just almost overnight, like he came on TV and he looked like Lou Ferrigno, like in the face and the body.
Absolutely. Like, 100% looked like Lou Ferrigno.
Like, how did he had those veins in his shoulders? Like, I had never seen a body transformation before or since that Don Morocco went through at the age of fucking 40. And, they renamed him The Rock, which I guess was a play on his last name of Morocco, but also because, he was a fucking brick shithouse now. And then he had that babyface run for about a year. And then he left the company and the body was just gone immediately again. And then he pops up in ECW in 1993 and he looks like a fucking meatball. It is so bizarre.
That's crazy, yeah.
How for 1 year
steroids are a hell of a drug, man, especially that era of steroids. God. Yeah, that era of steroids was wild shit there.
For 1 year of his life, though, he had the greatest body I've ever seen.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was ridiculous.
Looked like a competition level bodybuilder. Like literally looked like he could go on the stage with Lou Ferrigno and compete in a bodybuilding competition.
He looked like his skin was gonna burst at any
those
moment.
the veins. I always wanted to just touch those veins just to see what they felt like, because they were just, man, like I didn't even know you have veins there. Did you know you had veins there? Are you aware of that? Above your shoulder, there's this giant vein. I wasn't.
So vascular, just incredibly vascular. But
That's not why
Anyway,
you called. That's not why you called. Let's
that's
talk about
not why
Ole
you
Anderson.
called. The previous rocks in pro wrestling, including Al the Rock Rogowski. Yeah, I mean, he's from Minnesota. Trained by Vern Gagne. Meltzer told the funny story this week of how he went to wrestling training, and Vern said, well, which one of us do you want to get on the mat with? Because, back then you'd have to really wrestle and they would beat the shit out of you to break you in. And he picked the smallest guy in the room, who happened to be Danny Hodge, who then wiped the fucking mat with him.
Whoops.
And years later, in typical Ole fashion, he claims all along that he always knew it was Danny Hodge.
Of course. The smartest guy in the room. Ole, always the smartest guy in the room for sure. Yeah.
Cracking out smart Ole.
That reminds me of, wasn't it Vince that said, I'll take the little guy? And he was talking about Frank Shamrock when was it Frank Shamrock there? Yeah.
Yes,
people do not know this story. This is when the Chris Jericho was doing the match at WrestleMania with Mickey Rourke, when the wrestler was coming around or whatever, and Rourke had his like little entourage or whatever, and Frank Shamrock was part of that. And there was this idea that like Rourke was gonna shoot on Jericho, or Jericho was going to shoot.
Okay.
It was all just pro wrestling.
The idea
bullshit.
was Mickey Rourke brought his shooter buddies in case things didn't go as planned.
Yeah, right. In case Jericho started shooting on him or whatever.
So Frank Shamrock was one of them. And that, there was no chance that Chris Jericho was going to try to shoot on Mickey Rourke. But Mickey Rourke doesn't know any of these people. He was coming off of The Wrestler, and that's why they wanted to book him. And so he brought Frank Shamrock and a couple other guys with him. And as Rich said, the funny story was when they figured out that he brought this entourage, Vince said to Jericho, "I'll take that guy." And it happened to be Frank Shamrock.
I'll take the little guy. Little guy is MMA star,
MMA
Frank
pioneer
Shamrock.
Legend.
Frank Shamrock, who I feel could probably beat Vince McMahon in a fight.
There'd be no lawsuit today because he'd be dead. He would have been murdered by Frank Shamrock.
I'll take the little guy. I'll take the little guy. It's Frank Shamrock.
I'll handle that little fella. And you could be sure he thought he could.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But obviously nothing came of it, and it went off fine. But and then Ole Anderson had a long career spanning from the late 60s all the way into the early 90s. I think best known, he's one of those guys who's predominantly known as a great tag team wrestler. Whether it was with one of his three worked brothers, Gene Anderson, Lars Anderson, and then later Arn Anderson, who early on, people might not remember this, but he was billed as a nephew of Ole's. I don't think they designated which of the other brothers he was the son of, but that didn't last long, and he was eventually just billed as a brother, like the rest of them. And Ole obviously is a lot younger than the others. This is way after Gene and Lars were pretty much done, and they continued the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, which was the name of all of the various different combinations of Anderson brothers when they would team with one another, whether it was Gene and Lars or Gene and Ole, or Gene, Lars, and Ole as a six-man team, or later on Ole with Arn. And they were always billed as the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. And there was even a point in the either 89 or maybe 90. I think it was probably 90 when the AWA, when the Destruction Crew, Mike Enos and Wayne Bloom, were one of the last remaining stars of any value left in the dying AWA, and Ole Anderson was injured or something like that. But I remember them bringing Enos and Bloom into the NWA under masks as the Minnesota Wrecking Crew 2, under the tutelage of Ole Anderson, to fill in while like Ole was injured or whatever the deal was, until they got that sent back to the AWA, and then it folded, and then they ended up going to the WWF as the Beverly Brothers, and everybody else knows the rest. But that's kind of the history of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew and all the various incarnations. But Ole eventually, after bouncing back and forth from Mid-Atlantic and the AWA in the early days, and he wrestled as we said, as Al the Rock Rogowski when he was in the AWA, and he wrestled as Ole Anderson when he would work in some of the Southern territories, Florida, places like that. He eventually settled in Georgia, where, George Championship Wrestling, where he took the book, and he was a booker for some pretty successful periods in the 70s. He booked briefly for Mid-Atlantic in the late 70s or early 80s with not as much success. At one point, He was booking both territories at the same time, which led to
doing
a lot of
four shows a day, I think, for a little while is what he was doing, with 2 different towns in Georgia, 2 different towns in the Carolinas, which is just insane.
Is unsustainable. Yeah. And all the while, by the way, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew is one of the great tag teams of the era, winning titles. Can you look up how many times he was a tag team champion?
Actually, it was quite a lot. Yeah, I looked this up actually earlier. So he was a 2-time AWA Midwest Tag Team Champion, a 1-time Florida Tag Team Champion, a 1-time NWA National Tag Team Champion with Thunderbolt Patterson, a 17-time AWA Tag Team and NWA Georgia Tag Team Champion.
That's Georgia Championship.
That's Georgia. 7 times with Gene, 5 times with Ivan Koloff, 2 times with Lars Anderson, 1 with Rene Goulet, 1 with Ernie Ladd, and 1 time with Jerry Briscoe. He was also the NWA Macon Tag Team Champion with Gene Anderson, 1 time the NWA Southeastern Tag Team Champion with Gene Anderson. And then he was also the NWA National Tag Team Champion with Arn. NWA,
that's also Georgia.
That's Georgia / Jim Crockett / Mid-Atlantic or whatever. NWA Mid-Atlantic with Gene Anderson 3 times. NWA Atlantic Coast Tag Team Champion 4 times with Gene Anderson. And also NWA World Tag Team Champion 8 times, 7 times with Gene, 1 time with Stan Hansen.
Yeah.
So a lot.
So all the while he's booking Georgia, while he's booking Mid-Atlantic, while he's gaining power in pro wrestling, he's also part of a legendary tag team with Gene, predominantly Gene. He was also, a frequent tag team partner and champion with Ivan Koloff. They were a great team. And he had all those feuds with Gene Anderson as the Minnesota Wrecking Crew with like Wahoo McDaniel and Paul Jones and all these other teams from those territories. So a lot of these, and mostly these, he settled in these southern territories. He never really went back to the AWA. He never went up to Portland. He never went up to any of the Canadian territories or anything like that. He never ventured. He never worked for either of the Vince McMahons. He never went to the WWF or anything like that. He essentially settled in Georgia and the Mid-Atlantic areas. And, and was known for being his wrestling style. And I wrote about this behind the paywall on the Match of the Week. It very much matches his personality. No nonsense, rugged, simple. Simple, but very logical. And there was no wasted motion in his wrestling style. Everything made sense. But the thing was, unlike a lot of guys who worked like that, especially in that era, he wasn't lazy at all. He worked fast. He worked way faster than you would think he would. You look at this guy and you understand the way that he sort of worked, very in terms of deliberately working on a certain body part. Yeah, and you're thinking deliberate and paced.
Right, you're thinking he's just going to wrench in an arm thing and just hold it back or whatever. And then no, the bell rings. And I was watching a rock and roll match earlier today. Gene Arn and Ole versus the Rock and Roll Express. I watched both of them, but the one I was watching earlier was the cage match from Starrcade '86. And that guy, man, from the time the bell rings to the time it ends, that dude is working and he's moving every second of that match. And he's doing the same move over and over again. He's just kicking, kicking the arms and kicking the legs of the Rock and Roll Express. But but like you said, very quick. Like you might assume that he's very deliberate and very slow. Not at all.
There was nothing methodical. Nothing methodical about the way he worked at all.
He was just a bar brawler. He worked like a bar brawler.
He wasn't going to grab a hold and sit in a hold. He had a high work rate in the old way that the term was used. Okay? When people talk about work rate now, they're talking about flippy doos and fancy moves and guys who have good matches have good work rate. The original use of the term work rate was your pace, how hard you worked in a match. It didn't matter what kind of moves you were doing. It didn't even necessarily matter how good your matches were. If you describe someone as, hey, I got this guy that wants to come into the territory. He's got great work rate. Okay, what that meant to a promoter was, okay, he's action.
Yeah.
There's a lot of movement. He's not slow. He's not methodical, right? He might be green. He might not be a great worker from the sense of putting together great matches, But that's what now. And Ole Anderson was someone who, in the old definition of the term work rate, was a high work rate wrestler. And I don't know if people necessarily understand that. And the thing about it is, we don't have a ton of footage of him when he was young. It doesn't exist. The vast majority of footage of Ole Anderson is from the mid-30s on, and really from his late 30s on. Okay? He was born in 1942. Okay? So by 1980, when he did the big angle with Dusty Rhodes, he was 38, 39 years old. Okay? This was a guy who was already pushing 40, and, that's 1980. So the vast majority of his footage is when he's an older man. You can only assume, with as hard as he worked in his late 30s through his 40s, that he was working just as hard, if not harder, when he was a younger guy with better stamina who was in better shape. And the other thing about Ole Anderson is, you look at him and he looks like your mean uncle who slaps around your aunt who belongs in jail, with the beard, and he's balding and he doesn't necessarily have a great physique, but he was a really good athlete. Like, he's bigger than you think he is, first of all. Like, you look at his body and you're thinking, he's like a 5'9" pudgy guy or whatnot. But when you see him like standing with the Horsemen, he's like the tallest and widest. He's a big guy. Like, he's a bigger dude than he gets credit for. He was a good amateur wrestler, and he was a pretty good athlete. And his working style in the ring is, he was all about authenticity. And that's why he worked the way he did, with the constant motion. He didn't stand around and play to the crowd. He didn't taunt, because he wanted his matches to feel authentic and feel like a fight.
He was in a fight. When the bell rang, the fight began, and now he was in a fight against the opponent. It wasn't and that's, a lot of the Arn and Ole stuff that most people have probably seen, because like you said, very difficult to see any of the other stuff. Most people are going to know Ole from the Arn and Ole stuff, but when you watch their matches, the way that they work, I really do love it. It's something I've appreciated a lot more in recent years, because they work the kind of quote unquote what you would call the classic tag team wrestling, where they cut off the ring or whatever. But the way they do it is so much more, just so much more quicker pace than you might assume that they are, because they're tagging in and out. But what they're doing is just kicking. They're just taking turns beating the guy on the ground. They have a guy on the ground, the guy in the corner, and they're just kicking him and punching him and kicking him and punching him and tagging. And the next guy comes in and kicks and punch and kicks and punch and kicks and punch, because it's a fight. They're not out there exchanging, good drop kicks and good professional wrestling holds. They're fighting. They're fucking fighting the guy.
He's trying to win a fight. And, that term, make it feel like a fight, is kind of overused today and not applied correctly. And now that we've seen MMA, we know that really no pro wrestling matches look like fights, unless you're talking about strict shoot style, like from Japan or something, or maybe once a year with the blood sport shows here. And even those get a little, they don't exactly.
No, they're not.
There's you get. But
I don't think Josh Barnett and Johnny Bloodsport this WrestleMania weekend is going to feel like a fight. The way that people like to say it is.
Right, but so even though Ole's style has kind of been exposed, over time, in its time, everything about he did anytime he was out from behind the curtain, whether it was his promos, the way he carried himself, or the way he worked in the ring, was designed for authenticity and making it feel like it was real. That's what he was all about. And Ole Anderson, for me, when I was a little kid first discovering pro wrestling, and, I'd watch TBS in the morning, the 7:05 a.m. show, whatever time it came on, because they'd have a show at like 7:05 or 8:05 in the morning. Then the WWF syndicated shows would come on at noon, Superstars and Challenge. And then later on was the 6:05 show back on TBS. And when I was a little kid, I, like everyone listening, and like you, when you discover wrestling, you can't get enough of it. And you consume every fucking second of it.
That's not true, Joe. Actually, what I did is I cried and whined and pissed my pants because I didn't know who anybody was or what was going on. And then I went on to, my AOL chat rooms and said, "What's going on? Who are these people? Somebody explain this to me." Oh, wait, no, I didn't. I just watched every fucking week and learned who everybody was and went to the library and got books about it and just watched it and discovered.
And begged your mother to buy Pro Wrestling Illustrated.
I said, "Can I please go to the grocery store with you?" And she said, "I don't know why, but sure." And then I'd say, "All right, bye." And then I'd run over to the magazines and then she'd have to come find me when she was done. And that happened for years and years and years until I learned all about wrestling.
I'm not done reading this inside wrestling.
Right. I'm not buying it. You're not going to let me buy this. Let's be honest.
No.
Like, this thing's $5.99. I'm not taking this thing home. So just give me a couple more minutes and I'll be done.
So when you were a kid and Taka Michinoku and Great Sasuke showed up on Raw, you didn't lose your mind and complain. You just said,
I didn't.
Who are these guys? Oh, okay. They're pretty cool. I enjoy what they're doing here.
Right. Great Sasuke came out and did some cool moves, and I went, wow, that guy's kind of cool. I wish I could learn more about him. And then the next time I went to the grocery store, I looked through PWI, and I discovered that this man has been wrestling a lot of places and was very good. You
said to yourself, wow, where can I see more of this?
Yes.
This is different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyway, as a kid, I'd watch, because that was prime Crockett years, and I loved, obviously, the Road Warriors and Ric Flair, and Magnum TA was just like the coolest motherfucker. Like, he'd go in there against jobbers and just give him a belly to belly and beat him in 5 seconds, and then go back to his canasta game in the back. So it was just, there were just Dusty Rhodes. Who wouldn't be just attracted to that magnetism of a Dusty Rhodes promo, right? And the ultimate battle of the everyman and Ric Flair, the guy coming out talking about all the women he's fucking, wearing fur coats and his alligator shoes and his watch. And then there was Ole Anderson, who as a kid, I'm like, this guy sucks. Right? He looks like
your uncle. Yeah, he looks like your uncle.
Like, and there's nothing flashy about him. But then over the years, as you begin to learn more about wrestling and you become a bigger fan and you start to understand how wrestling works and what makes good pro wrestling, Ole Anderson is a wrestler who undoubtedly grew on me to the point now where he's legitimately one of my favorite people to go back and watch. I love watching Ole Anderson wrestle. There was somebody in our Discord, I forget your name, I'm sorry, I'm sure you're listening. He's starting wrestling school soon. And he was asking advice, like, what kind of tape should I watch, and get the basics down. And immediately my answer to the kid or the guy, I'm sorry, I don't know how old you are. I assume you're not like 43 if you're starting wrestling.
Yeah, also, if you're 43 and starting wrestling school, please don't. Please go do something else, please. Please be a kid.
I think there's like two success stories. There's, who's the guy that was in WWF during who did the flamboyant gimmick, who then became a Las Vegas cop?
Rico.
Rico started like at 40.
Or something like that. Yeah, he started in his 40s, and then Boogeyman, right?
Boogeyman's another one. And the other one that people like to point to is Diamond Dallas Page, because he didn't really start wrestling till his mid-30s. But that's kind of cheating because he was in the business like his whole life. Like he was a manager and he knew how to take bumps and, so, but yeah. But anyway, this guy was asking who he should watch. And my immediate answer was, if you want to work in a way that nobody's working today and where you'll stand out, watch Ole Anderson tapes and just watch the basics of how Ole Anderson does the basics. And he was like ferocious in that fucking ring. Like you said, his basic kind of match was he didn't give his opponent a second to breathe. He was either beating your ass or he was selling for you, one or the other. There was no wasted time. There was no dead time between the spots. He wasn't thinking about what he was going to do next. Mm-hmm. He was putting the boots to you. And
like you said, he didn't stand up and turn to the crowd with his hands in the air and go, yeah, boo me, like classic. No. That's too long in a fight. Don't turn your back on a guy you're fighting with.
That's right. And he would pick a body part, and then very often he would win the match by submitting the guy by just grabbing that fucking body part. Like, he won so many matches with that like standing arm bar. Right, where the guy was down and he'd get on and he'd put the guy in armbar. That was his finisher for a while before, really the concept of finishers. But he would finish guys with a fucking armbar after ripping their arm off their body for the length of the match. Basic, simple, but tenacious is the best way I could describe his style. And he's just a fucking joy to watch, and he's become one of my favorite guys to go back and rewatch and reinvestigate. And he's one of two guys who, when I go back and watch old 80s territory footage, there's two wrestlers who every time I watch them, I think to myself, I wish more wrestlers today worked like this guy. Okay. One of them is Ole Anderson and the other one is Buzz Sawyer. Those are my two.
I watched a match with those two earlier today, and that match fucking rocks. It is easily available on YouTube. It is. Let me get the exact guys that were in that match. But yeah, I saw those two. It was Ole and Arn versus Buzz Sawyer and Terry Taylor. And you just
I know the match.
And can you imagine those guys, Ole and Arn just licking their chops at pretty boy Terry Taylor in that ring or whatever. Yeah. And Buzz Sawyer's teaming with Terry Taylor, which seems like a very strange bedfellows at that time. But that match is pretty damn good. I love it.
Rocks. And the finish is so great because the Andersons are beat, so they just toss Terry over the top rope to get DQ'd.
Right. They're like,
Isn't that the finish?
You know what?
It's something like that, right? Where
let me see if it's the same one that I was watching. Yeah, I believe you're right, but let me double check to make sure.
Yeah, where like the baby faces make the comeback, and there's like a roll up, and instead of just breaking up the pin, Ole just grabs him and like tosses him over the top rope in full view and just takes the DQ, because I guess in his eyes it's better. I think that's the same match. But yeah, Buzz Sawyer and Ole Anderson are the two guys where it would be so great if there were guys that worked like them today, because it just, their style doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Terry's got, so sorry to interrupt, but Terry's got Arn in, what is he doing here?
Like a schoolboy or something?
Yeah, he puts him against the ropes and does like kind of a victory roll or a schoolboy. And Arn just runs in, grabs Terry by the head and tosses him over the top rope and looks to the referee and it's just like, yeah, fucking disqualify me. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
And then runs to the outside to beat his ass on the outside. It's great. It's so good.
And then he jump him on the floor.
God damn it. God, wrestling used to be so much better. Fuck.
And at the start of that, see, it's so funny you watch that match, because I remember that fucking match. At the start of that match, Buzz Sawyer starts that match. And during the introductions, he's just stalking back and forth. He's like,
yeah, he can't wait. He cannot wait for the bell to ring.
He's chomping at the bit, like.
No, he's literally stomping. He's literally going dun 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 dun, and then the bell rings.
Like
they
at the mouth.
They just exchange grapples. It's Arn and Buzz just exchanging grapples, and then finally get in corners and just exchange slaps to the chest. It's fucking great. It's so good.
Oh my god, just meat slapping pro wrestling. It's so good. But I can't believe you watched that. Like, that's a match that I contemplated doing that as the match of the week.
It's so good. Yeah.
The match
maybe next week
against the Chronodals, because what I wanted to demonstrate was, even in just a basic ass TV match, Ole had his style and he was sticking to it. I didn't want to try to pick something that, you know what I mean? So, but maybe I'll do that match next week, because that is an awesome match. That's so funny that you brought that up. I can't believe that, like, and then you made me remember that match. But
and you nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah, but ask me what the WrestleMania card was last year, and I can tell you like one match.
Right.
You know, it's incredible what resonates with you, because the things that resonate with you are the things that you enjoy, right? It's not the things that you don't like or that you think suck. What resonates with you is shit that you think is good. You heard the excitement just percolate. I'm like, I know that fucking match. I can't remember shit, but I remembered the finish to that match from fucking 35 years ago, or whatever the fuck it was. But yeah, anyway, that's I think people who haven't seen a lot of Ole and you're judging him by his cover, you might not understand his work. It's not what it is exactly what you're thinking, but in a completely different style than you might.
But probably much faster than you think it is. Yeah, much.
Yeah,
where today's wrestlers think that working a body part is Randy Orton slow bullshit, where you sit in the middle of the ring in a side headlock, or you do very deliberate, elbows to the back of someone's knee or whatever, and you can do that, and there's nothing inherently wrong with doing that, but I much prefer Ole Anderson attacking a body part, but doing so with velocity and nonstop action and that sort of tenacity that you just do not get from a lot of other modern wrestlers.
Tenacious is the best way to describe him. He was a tenacious worker, and I guess my hot take was going to be that look, I love Arn and Tully. I love them. You know where I'm going with this. They weren't a tag team for very long. They're a legendary tag team. They're the tag team that always gets named as the Horseman tag team when people bring up the classic Horsemen. I prefer Arn and Ole as a tag team to Arn and Tully. As great as Arn and Tully were,
that's a tough one.
If I had the old deserted island comp tape, if it's one team or the other, I'm taking Arn and Ole.
So I think I get why you would come to that conclusion. And I think one of the big reasons is think about how those two teams worked. I think today you're getting a lot of Arn and Tully style wrestling in today's wrestling. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's nobody doing it as good as those guys are doing it, but a lot of guys can do that style. FTR can do Arn and Tully. You know what I mean? Maybe it's not as good as Arn and Tully, but they can do Arn and Tully, and they do a lot. That's kind of what that's one of their shticks is kind of essentially a dollar store Arn and Tully. Nobody's doing Arn and Ole.
No, and that's why I suggested to that kid to watch some Ole tapes because
right. I think that's probably what's making it because I think like honestly to me I don't know if I could decide because I think they're two completely different teams that go completely different styles. So it's like it feel weird picking one over the other. I'm probably with you. I'd probably prefer an Arn and Ole, but I do get how some people might be taken aback by that. But I think it's more or less that I can get Arn and Ole from a lot of different places. I can get similar styles to Arn and Arn and Tole from a lot of different places, and a lot of other people can do that sort of stuff. But man, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Who the fuck is wrestling like Arn and Ole in today's wrestling? There's zero, not one team that I have seen wrestle in the last 15 years can even come close to matching what they do.
And this is what I'm saying. You're telling me if you transported Buzz Sawyer to now, he wouldn't get over. He would translate to this era. And I think someone who worked like Ole Anderson would get over because first of all, the work is excellent. Ole Anderson's a great pro wrestler. Don't let anybody tell you any different. Like we're talking about his style, but he was great at what he was doing as well. And because no one is working like that today, and because it's a high-paced style, I think it would fit today.
Absolutely.
And stand out because it's so different, because he doesn't leave his feet, because it's the FTR mantra of, all fists, no flips or whatever. That really was Ole.
Yeah, even though those guys flip constantly. It's so funny. It's like,
and so I really believe that style of wrestling would stand out,
yeah.
But it's not, you can't just roll out of bed and be good at that and look like you're completely decimating another human being and ripping their limbs off and doing it in a credible style, because Ole was the total package in that regard. Now look, he's a top 0.01% promo too. We haven't even talked about that.
Oh yeah. Now let's talk about him talking, which is a whole different level.
Yeah, so I guess this is a great time to talk about the angle with Dusty, which, the 1980 Ole Anderson turns on Dusty Rhodes in the cage in the Omni, and longtime listeners probably know, because I've done it a lot with the Bloodline over the last couple of years. Have people call the Bloodline the greatest storyline in the history of wrestling. And whenever people want to have that conversation, one thing I always say on the show is, how does it stack up to Ole Anderson turning on Dusty Rhodes in 1980? Before you can sit here and tell me that the Bloodline or anything else is the greatest storyline or angle in the history of wrestling, first you need to stack it up to Ole and Dusty in the cage. Okay, that's number one. And if it doesn't stack up to that angle, then I'm not interested in the conversation. Because to me, that is quite possibly the greatest storyline / angle in the history of wrestling when you're talking about the execution and the impact and the logic and how logical it was every step of the way for an entire year and a half leading up to it. It wasn't just a one-night angle. It was put together over the course of like 18 months.
Yeah.
Okay. And by
the way, how much of this is available to watch? This feels like ripe for a deep dive for us to dust off the deep dive, but I don't know how much is around there.
I'll tell you what's around. The match itself, it's just that one handheld angle of the turn.
The
right?
cage, yeah,
and really,
in the cage.
That's essentially the whole match. It's not like some super long match. It's just essentially an angle disguised as a match.
Well, and the reason why, again, is because it was an actual wrestling story at that time when that logic sort of mattered, and the bell rang, and they didn't want a fake fight because they were going to turn on Dusty, so it's just like they immediately ran in, and it's not one of those things where after a 25-minute match, then guys run in to turn on a guy, or then someone swivels the hips and hits somebody with a chair, or any of that bullshit that we see today. It's like, no, we're going to turn on this guy, so we're not going to waste any fucking time. We're just going to go at it.
Well, yeah, Ole's idea was as soon as I get tagged in, I'm going to turn on him, and he explains that because there's a video going around of the episode of Georgia Championship Wrestling that followed the turn where Ole Anderson gives the legendary promo to Gordon Soley explaining the angle and the story every step of the way. Okay. The backstory is Ole and Dusty never got along. They had these legendary feuds. Ole does a face turn in Georgia. No one is less, equipped to be a babyface than Ole Anderson. Okay,
noted asshole Ole Anderson. Yeah, both in real life and wrestling. No, he's
right in kayfabe or out of kayfabe. He's not likable, man. So he's on this babyface run after teaming with Gene Anderson for years and terrorizing the babyfaces, after terrorizing Dusty Rhodes for their entire careers, after teaming most recently up to that point in the late 70s with Ivan Koloff and winning the Georgia Tag Team titles a billion times with him. He turns babyface, and he's teaming with Tommy Rich, and he's teaming with Stan Hansen, who's a babyface at the time, and he's teaming with all the babyfaces, and he's wrestling against the heels, and they didn't rush through it. He was a babyface for a decent length of time there, but he never teamed with Dusty, and he explains this in the promo, and that's a very important detail. Like, it would have been easy to pair up these two longtime rivals immediately now that they were both on the same side of the locker room, but that wouldn't have worked for the story. So the whole idea was, after Ole teamed with all these babyfaces, and in the promo with Sully, he's like, and I had to travel the roads with Tommy Rich. And
Stan with Hansen. Such disdain.
And he was like,
Tommy Rich.
He has this great line where he's like, and I hated every second of it. I hated every second of it, right? And he's like, and then Dusty came to me. I didn't go to Dusty. Dusty came to me. Dusty asked for my help against the Assassins. Dusty wanted to team with me. And I said, now's the time. Now I can pull off my plan. And the only person who knew was my brother Gene, not my brother Lars, that piece of garbage, that turncoat, because Lars stayed babyface.
Lars is babyface. Yeah, Lars is babyface this time.
Not Lars. Not the Assassins didn't know. Ivan didn't know. The only one who knew was Gene. And the whole idea was Dusty came to Ole to team with him because Dusty finally trusted him because Ole had been teaming with the baby faces all of this time, right? And Ole never went to, and he made it clear it's Dusty that came to me. So he sets up, they have the cage match, and Ole, it's perfect because they're in a cage. And Gene, and they each have their hand-picked referees. The Assassins picked Ivan Koloff, and Ole and Dusty picked Gene Anderson, right? With the idea, Dusty's idea, well, Ole can trust Gene, so I can trust Gene. But Gene was the only other one in on the plan. Even the other heels weren't in on the plan, right? So they're beating the shit out of Dusty in this cage, and Ole's just standing in the corner, right? He's just waiting for the tag. He's not going in there to save him, right? Finally, Dusty fights through this wave of heels, and he gets to the corner and makes the hot tag, and Ole steps through the ropes, and he's talking through this footage to Gordon Solie, and there's this great moment during the promo where you see Ole tag in, and there's this brief second, probably not even as long as 1 full second, where he's staring at Ivan and the Assassins, right? But he watches them first before he turns to Dusty and starts putting the boots to him. And he says to Gordon Solie, he goes, now watch me tag in, Gordon. I had to make sure that the Assassins weren't going to attack me from behind because they didn't know what was coming.
Right.
So once I knew the coast was clear, right down to every fucking detail.
Every bit of it.
Explained.
Yep.
And then when he knew that he was safe from the Assassins attacking him, he turns to attack Dusty. And then the other heels realize what's going on.
Are you sure this is better than N Uso might not be Oos enough? Are you sure?
At each other.
Are you sure?
Making faces. Yeah. And then
Paul
the other
Heyman
heels,
shaking, his jowls shaking. Are you sure this isn't better? I don't know. I'm not sure.
And then Gene, who was the only other one in on it, joins in. And then the other heels, they all
they're
shrug
like,
their
oh
shoulders
shit!
and go,
All right, yeah, cool. Fuck Dusty.
And they
Let's
start
do
kicking
this.
his ass.
Right.
Then the baby faces are trying to climb the cage.
But they're in a cage.
Lars Anderson is out there trying to climb the cage. Rich, there's fans trying to climb the cage. There's fans trying to climb this cage because they're so incensed that Dusty got set up and is getting jumped and getting the shit kicked out of him by these guys. Just incredible angle set up for a whole fucking year. And this promo by Ole is top tier all time stuff as and Gordon Solie's disgust all the way through.
I can't believe it, Ole. You're despicable, Ole.
You're disgusting actions of Ole Anderson. Look at this.
It's so good.
And Ole, just the way, and the fans are just chanting, we don't want it. And he's like, well, you're gonna hear it. He's like, you're gonna hear it.
Yeah.
And he keeps telling, oh my God, it's so fucking good. It's so good. And the way he explains every step of the way and every single moment of that fucking story and angle makes 100% total sense.
Yep.
There is not a hole you can poke in any of it.
Yeah, they thought of every logic gap and closed every single one of them up because that mattered and that was important.
And you know what? They didn't even have to do that because all along the way, they just made sure everything made sense. So then when the angle takes place, it all just falls into place. It's incredible. And then, okay, because this episode of TV was uploaded. It's on Chris Zellner's YouTube account.
Yep.
Okay.
I just linked it in the but I'll try to link it in the show notes as well. But if you look up Ole Anderson heel turn on Dusty, you'll find it in seconds.
And then all the follow-up promos from everybody else. There's this great promo with Ivan Koloff with Gordon. And he's like, all right, let me tell you something, Gordon Soley. I didn't know what was happening, but once I saw Ole putting the boots to Dusty, a big smile came on my face, and I said, all right, let's put the boots to him. And he explains what's going on in his brain as it's all going on, and then Dusty.
And then the Dusty promo, which is
promo.
as good or not better than the Ole promo. Yeah, it's so good.
I know, it's good. Oh my God, it's so fucking good. And Dusty's like, the rain of hell that's gonna pour down on you, brother. I don't ask for help. I don't need any help. But Andre the Giant's gonna be with me in the Omni. He's bringing in Andre the fucking Giant.
Right. All right, you fucking me up. Bring in Andre.
Rich, I'm trying to figure out how to buy tickets.
Calling the Omni. Hey, I want to be there for calling the Omni right now and saying, hey guys, I got 2 for the Ole versus Dusty.
Like, when it comes to hell, don't need none, don't want none, but I'm going to bring in Andre the Giant. It's just incredible. Everything. And then undercard wrestler Mike George. Did you see that part where he's kissing up to Ole?
I was like, what's Mike George doing here?
You got Mike George out there, and, and he's being a total kiss up, and he's telling Gordon Soley, and he's Mike George, I can't believe what we're hearing out of you, Mike George. And then Ole comes out, and Mike George offers his hand. He's like, Ole, I just want you to know that if you need backup, I'll stand right behind you and back you up against Dusty Rhodes. And he's just like, this fucking piece of shit. Mike George trying to be a barnacle. And then he goes in there and wins a squash as Ole's standing at ringside, So it's like the whole company is involved in this fucking angle. Stan Hansen and Kevin Sullivan come out, and Kevin Sullivan with that Boston accent. He's like, I can't do a Boston accent, but he can't believe what fucking I was riding with Ole in the car, and I can't believe it. And he's fucking disgusted, and Stan Hansen's disgusted, and the whole thing is just a fucking masterpiece. It's a fucking masterpiece from start to finish. The angle itself, none of those fans saw it coming. Nobody saw it coming. And Ole Anderson, right back to his fucking roots as a despicable heel whose war with Dusty Rhodes was never going to end. Behind the scenes either, years later, as it would turn out as well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that is just, and you want to talk about your bloodline, you want to talk about fucking Hangman getting over the drink. I don't care what, you can't tell me anything is the greatest storyline of all time until you tell me how it stacks up to Ole turning on Dusty in that cage. That's it. That's the fucking benchmark. I don't want to hear it otherwise. And if you don't know a thing about it, then you shouldn't have an opinion. I'm gatekeeping your ass. Go watch the fucking tape and go watch that. And then if you want to make an argument that whatever fucking storyline you're into is better than that, then we can sit down and have a conversation.
But you got to watch that first.
Okay?
You got to watch it first.
Yeah,
we have to know that you watched it first. There will be a quiz. There will be a quiz afterwards.
There will be a fucking quiz. Okay? And believe me, nobody was running to their fucking letters to the editor to complain that poor old Ole Anderson was getting booed by the crowd. Okay? Nobody tried to pull that routine. Oh, he's out there trying his best. Why are we booing him? None of that bullshit either. Okay? This is pro wrestling. This is pro wrestling. God damn, it was so fucking good. And it's unbelievable to me that the same guy who could put that together and construct that came up with the Black Scorpion.
Right, and that came up with numerous fucking horrific ideas in the late 80s and early 90s. Yeah. And that's
payback is hell, Daddy. Payback is hell, Dad. Dusty. Oh my God.
So good.
How good is it? Where's my ticket? How do I buy that on a
There's got to be more. There's got to be more footage out there. We got to hit up Charles. PW Lost, see what's out there. I think we can.
Why can't wrestling be like that, Rich?
We got to cobble together enough to make this a deep dive. I got to watch all this stuff. We got to
There's nothing to watch. I mean, that's everything.
There's got to be something else. There's got to be something more out there. Has to be.
This shit wasn't fucking out. You can't find the follow up tags or anything. It's not there. You can ask him. But that's the thing. There's that famous story. An infamous story, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Ole probably had all the tapes, but what happened to him?
Yeah. Ole found out that Vince bought the Georgia tapes, so he took the master tapes he had and set them on fire in his backyard. So fuck that. Vince isn't getting my shit. That's Ole. Ole wasn't always wrong. Let's be clear. Ole was wrong about a lot of things.
Oh, yeah. Wrong about a lot of things and wrong about a lot of people and some fucking horrific views on other people and all-time asshole. But his hatred of Vince McMahon, the old handshake.
Sound.
The handshake, the meme of like, with the handshake emoji in between, like,
yeah,
us and him on the hatred of Vince McMahon, the little handshake emoji in between the two. Yeah, that's a man who I wish I could hate Vince McMahon as much as that man hates Vince McMahon.
Yeah, and that audio clip.
I aspire to it.
Where Vince introduced Linda to him and he goes, fuck her and fuck you too. I mean,
so good.
And he really said that.
Oh, of course he did.
There's no doubt he said that. He was so annoyed. I mean, because, okay, for people who don't know, Black Saturday, all right, how that came to be was the Briscoes and Jim Barnett, who had something like 75 or 80 or 90% of the fucking Georgia Championship Wrestling stock, and Ole had the rest. And behind Ole's back, they sold out to Vince McMahon. And Vince took over the 605 television slot on TBS. Now, just, Rich, check me, because I don't want to get any of this wrong. Step in if I fucking mess up. So, they sold it to Vince for, like, under $1 million, like $900,000.
Very low figure.
Like
that, I think you're right about the number. Or in the
range. Which Ole never stopped complaining about for years, till his fucking death and all these great shoot interviews he does. He's like, look, I wouldn't be opposed to selling to Vince at one point, but if we had waited several more years, we could have sold that to him for double, triple, 4 times the money. These assholes went and sold to him for under $1 million. And they took it, and so they got something like, when it all got chopped up between them and Barnett and everything, they ended up with like what, $250,000 or $300,000 or whatever it was a piece. The Briscoes did, and they ended up with jobs. And Jack Briscoe hated working that territory so much that he just quit a few months later. He got off a plane, I think, to work an East Rutherford show in the fucking Meadowlands and said, you know what, fuck this, I'm going home.
He went to your home state and said, fuck this, I'm going back to Oklahoma.
Yeah,
Screw
I can't
this.
deal with it. I'm out of here.
Right.
And we all know Jerry stuck around and, had a job for life and all of that. But Ole, that's an instance where he was right. If they would have waited, they could have gotten more money out of Vince probably down the line at some point, or more money from Jim Crockett or whoever the fuck, right? So, anyway, they sold it out from underneath him, and, Ole still had his meager percentage or whatever it was, but Vince got the 605 time slot. He didn't want the other time slots. So what Ole did is he said, fuck this. If Vince owns Georgia Championship Wrestling and is shutting it down, Ole went and started Championship Wrestling from Georgia.
Right? with encouragement from Ted Turner as well. So Ted Turner also, Black Saturday happens and Vince is putting WWF like syndicated show stuff on 605. Now you imagine a weekly Georgia Championship Wrestling viewer tuning in and seeing seeing that level
1984.
Right. Yeah, like a big difference. A pretty big difference in style. And also he wasn't giving him first run stuff. Ted Turner said, you can have the 605 time slot, you can keep that time slot, but I want first run live, a television or whatever, like I was getting from Georgia Championship Wrestling. And Vince, as he wants to do and does still to this day, made a deal and then reneged on the deal immediately and said, no, I'm not actually going to do that. So he was sending him syndicated shit, tape shit. And Ted said, fuck off. And the fans complained. People said, what the hell happened to my 605? Like, what's going on in my wrestling? What's going on? Like, we now live in a world where obviously wrestling is way more accessible. But think about it again. Like, you knew no other wrestling. If you were watching a 605 TBS watcher at that time, every Saturday, you watched the same wrestling with mostly the same people. And now all of a sudden, boom, here's this new guy with this whole new style. It's brighter. There's bigger lights, but the wrestling sucks. And it's not first run, and it's not from any arenas that you recognize. It's from Boston Garden and shit. It's wild. And so that's, Ted Turner basically said, well, you didn't live up to your end of the deal. You have that time slot, but you know what, Ole, 7 a.m. on Saturdays, here you go. Here's your time slot. And then Ole starts Championship Wrestling from Georgia.
What's forgotten is Vince declined that time slot. He just wanted the 605 time slot. So Ole starts up Championship Wrestling from Georgia, and he gets on TV. And then Ted Turner puts Bill Watts on the network as well. And then both of those shows are outdrawing Vince's show in the better time slot. Vince has the prime, legendary, this has been the time to watch wrestling for years time slot at 6:05. And he's getting beat by the startup Championship Wrestling from Georgia, which, Ole had all the wrestlers. Only a couple guys chose to stay with Vince, like the Spoiler and I think a couple of others. But the rest of the crew stuck with Ole. So think if you're a wrestling fan in 1984, pre-internet, and you turn on wrestling on Black Saturday and it's all these guys you don't recognize, but then you turn on the wrestling at 7:00 in the morning the next week and it's, here's all my guys. And it's the same Georgia wrestling, the Championship Wrestling. You probably
right. It's meant to look very similar. Yeah. They're trying to trick you, the viewer, to thinking, here it is. They just switched time slots. Okay. They're on at 7 a.m. now. Fine. Okay. I'll watch this now.
And it's all the same wrestlers too, that you were used to before. And then Bill Watts wrestling is similar in style and obviously to what the Southern wrestling fan was used to. And
that was on Sunday nights, right? Sunday evenings, I believe, was the Mid-South.
I think so, yeah. That was the Sunday show. And then Vince was getting his ass kicked, and Ted was annoyed because Vince, surprise, surprise, wasn't living up to his end of the deal. And he was sending Gorilla Monsoon down there to host the show with the guy's name escapes me, the guy that had been working for Georgia Championship Wrestling, and they were just introducing taped matches from, like you said, from wherever they did their tapings. It was just this slow style with the bigger, slower guys and the lower work rate, and it just wasn't going to fly. So I guess it was in spring of '85 where Vince sold it to Crockett, but then Crockett also bought out Ole and Championship Wrestling from Georgia. So Ole, when he started up Championship Wrestling from Georgia, brought all of the titles, the national titles from, all those title holders that told Vince to screw off and stuck with Ole. So the title lineages from Georgia Championship Wrestling continued on through Championship Wrestling from Georgia. And then when Ole sold to Crockett, after Crockett bought all of the time slots up, those lineages continued into Crockett as well. That's why you'll see matches with like Arn and Ole as the national tag team champions in like 1985, but for Mid-Atlantic, right? Because all those Georgia titles, those lineages continued through all these different promotions and eventually got merged and folded in.
Right. And Vince didn't care about any of that shit. He didn't want Georgia Championship Wrestling. He wanted 605. He wanted the 605 time slot on TBS. That's all he gave a shit about.
That's all he cared about.
He didn't care about the titles or the wrestlers or any of that shit.
Yeah. So then that's Ole sold Championship Wrestling from Georgia right around the same time that Crockett bought the time slot back from Vince. He also bought Ole's promotion, and that was really it for Ole as a promoter, because at that point he joined Jim Crockett Promotions and he began teaming with Arn, and then not long after that the Four Horsemen form as kind of an accident. Those guys, Ole, Arn, Tully, JJ, and Flair, they were just the top heels, and they were aligned based on that. And they would come out and cut promos sometimes together, sometimes separately, but they were loosely aligned in storylines. And then there was that one promo where they all happened to be together, and Arn Anderson, unplanned on a whim, just called them the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse and held up the four fingers. And fans just ate that shit up, and it caught on, and they just ran with it. The Four Horsemen almost happened by accident. I mean, if Arn hadn't thought of that in that moment, or the segment was 10 seconds shorter, or someone else just, if Flair just, ate up all the promo time, the Four Horsemen ultimately never exist.
Right.
It was just an accidental thing, a happy accident that led to just, obviously, the stable that all other stables are basically have been modeled after, since. So that's how that came to be. And, and this is really, we're heading into the back nine of Ole's career at this point. He's obviously a vital member of the Four Horsemen in the early days. Now, as far as being a booker in WCW, when you really think about it, he was the booker in 1990. We know that. And he's the one who put the title on Sting. But don't give him a ton of credit for that, because he never really believed in Sting. Like, if you listen to Ole talk years later in shoot interviews, He wasn't so sure about Sting. It's just everybody else was telling him that Sting was going to be.
Oh, and he was ready to give the title to Lex Luger. Famously, you know, and I talk about this in the franchise series I'm doing right now for our Patreon as well, going over the career of Sting. Like, Sting gets hurt, and then he's basically like, all right, great, Lex Luger's going to win the title from you, Flair. And Flair's the one that says, no, I'm not losing to Lex Luger. And Luger was gaining steam at that time, too, and it probably would have made sense, and it would have been a decent idea. But Flair was kind of embedded into the career of Sting, obviously dating back to the Clash of Champions 88 or whatever. And Flair said basically, no, I don't want to lose the title to Luger. I'm going to wait till Sting's healthy and ready to go. And Sting was eventually healthy and ready to go a couple months later. So Great American Bash is when the title turns to him. But WCW and Ole were more than ready to just give the title to Luger and not even do the Sting thing. So that lines up with, like you said, where he never quite saw it with Sting. And it makes sense. Sting's not the prototypical Ole Anderson, the type of guy that Ole would really, you know, like all that much. If you know.
I mean, shit, Ole admits that he didn't really see anything in Sting.
Right.
I mean, and so when you really think about it, okay, so Dusty, when Crockett Dusty's the booker from like 85 till he gets fired in 88, right? For the hot period. Mm-hmm. And before that was like Dory Funk Jr. and all that. But that is essentially a different universe of Jim Crockett Promotions when you're talking about the 80 to 84 era. So what we're talking about is starting in 85. Dusty's the booker till about 88. He gets fired for doing the blood angle on TV. Crockett takes over for a couple of months there until he brings back George Scott, right? George Scott comes in early 89, and that is a fucking disaster.
That's
talked about it
almost worse than the Ole period.
Yeah, because George Scott just didn't, we've told the stories that we're not going to do it again, but he just was out of touch, didn't know, he had once been a great booker in that territory, but he'd been gone too long. He was out of touch. It was just a fucking mess. He barely lasted a few months. Then it's that weird amalgamation. It's like Flair and
the
Eddie
committee.
Gilbert.
Hey, we're going to do a committee, and there's like 7 guys on the committee, and that's not going to work. Yeah, it's Flair and Eddie Gilbert and Dusty, and there's way too many guys.
No Dusty. Cornette,
oh, sorry, no Dusty, but yeah, Flair, Eddie Gilbert, and I forget who else is there, but it's
Jim
never
Cornette,
it's never
Kevin Sullivan, and I talk about this in the Gilbert doc, the Jovember episode with Gilbert. When Crockett buys out Bill Watts in 87 or whatever it is, 87. He buys out Florida, right? He tells Gilbert, he makes all these promises to Gilbert, but Gilbert knows it's bullshit because before they even shut down the UWF, like Dusty's already faxing him what to book. Like Gilbert already sees that I'm not going to have any power here because the original plan was to keep those territories going after Crockett bought them, with Gilbert installed as the booker there. And I don't know, at Florida, it was either fucking Steve Kern, whoever the fuck it was in Florida. I don't even remember. But it was definitely Gilbert in the UWF. And obviously that didn't last long. And eventually they just closed down Florida. They closed down the UWF. And then they brought in the guys that they thought were useful. That, Eddie Gilbert, Sting, obviously, Terry Taylor, Steve Williams. I'm going to forget some. Probably Michael Hayes. And everybody else just, by that point in the UWF, it was a lot of guys. They were using a lot of guys from Texas because Texas was dying. So you had a lot of Skandar Akbar and Wild Bill Irwin and people like that. And Iceman King Parsons. A lot of those guys, when they shut it down, they just weren't interested in, and they just went back to Texas and took part in every single failed world-class revival that went on for the next fucking decade. But the other, the Eddie Gilberts and Sting, of course, and Rick Steiner, I forgot Rick Steiner, and people like that. Missy Hyatt, they got brought in, and Gilbert was part of the booking committee for a little while in 89, 90-ish, but he was still super young. He was probably not even 30 at that point, and he's in there with killers, fucking Ric Flair and Kevin Sullivan, these grizzled fucking politickers. Gilbert never got along with Sullivan. A lot of it was due to this period. Gilbert never particularly got along with Ric Flair. He did get along with Cornette, but and Ole was probably in that mix since he was hanging around during that time period. But then Ole, once the committee fucking didn't work, Ole was the booker in 1990, and Ole was the person who booked Sting to win his first world title, and Ole was the guy who booked the Black Scorpion angle, but he got fired before it played out. I'm not sure how many people realize that. He got fired before the end of that thing, but it's not like he had some great plan. If you listen to shoot interviews with Ole now and he gets asked about it, he kind of meanders and talks out of his ass and pretends like he's the smartest guy in the room, but it's very clear he had no clue what the fuck he was doing with the Black Scorpion. No end game. There was no goal.
No. Yeah, zero idea from A to B to see what was going to happen on that story. It was, let's do this story, and then we'll figure it out later. And
1990 was not a good year for the company, and that's not, when you're talking about Ole as a booker, it's really the 70s where he had most of his booking success in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these other booking reigns he had were not very successful. And then Jim Herd fires him, and they bring back Dusty at that point. Dusty, because Dusty finishes up at Royal Rumble 91. And we're going to talk, oddly enough, we're about to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Dusty finishes up at Royal Rumble 91, and then Herd fires Ole Anderson. And I guess there's like the last couple weeks of 1990 and the first few weeks of 91. I don't know. It's probably just some committee again, or just Herd piecing it together. I don't even know how I would classify the booker at that point, but it's Dusty. And then Dusty falls out of favor a couple years later, and Ole gets another crack at it as part of these various different committees and whatnot. And he's with the company until the Bischoff era. Bischoff takes over around 94, I guess. Maybe
late 93, early 94. So Ole also oversees the Shockmaster. It does the voice for the Shockmaster.
Yes.
Not good. Also not
voice
very
of the
good.
Black Scorpion, voice of the Shockmaster, two of the worst gimmicks to ever, come across. But then Bischoff takes over for Jim Herd. I don't know if that was a direct handoff. There might have been some.
No. So you have Herd out, and then you have the Kip Allen. You have the.
Oh right, I forgot that whole. Kip Allen
you
Fry,
have the Bill Watts and the Kip Allen Fry era until finally
Bischoff.
then Bischoff. Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't go Herd to Bischoff. Yeah. Now Kip Allen Fry was an amicable guy who really wanted to stay hands off with the wrestling and let the wrestling people handle it, but he was not a wrestling guy, and he was in over his head, and he got ate up, and they had to get rid of him.
Right.
And then it was like when you fire a football coach who's like known as a player's coach.
Yeah, they went with the players guy, and then they went with Bill Watts.
Right, exactly.
Who cracked his knuckles and said, all right, no one's getting paid shit. We're going to keep things in the ring. None of you high-flying assholes anymore. None of this shit. We're going to take it old school. And I love Bill Watts era WCW, but maybe not the right guy for to compete on the national level with Vince McMahon's WWF at the time.
Did shitty business, but I like it. I like
I fucking love 1992 WCW. It's my favorite.
One thing I learned that I didn't really know was that the whole top rope stuff was all designed to eventually bring top rope moves back and then get them over more. That I didn't know. Recently. So, that whole thing where banning moves off the top, like eventually he was going to allow them, and then they would have been over more than they would have been over.
Right. He said take them away for a little bit. Everybody was overdoing them. He wanted the heels to have a good thing to do, is do the over the top rope and get, people booing them. And then little by little, he was going to start bringing them back to make it more spectacular, because you hadn't seen anybody do anything off the top rope for a year. And all of a sudden here comes flying Brian Pillman doing a crazy move off the top rope or whatever. So I see what he's going for, but ultimately, another guy who the business had pretty much passed him by at that point. Even if I loved him, even if I loved that era of WCW, but the business had probably passed Watts behind.
Yeah, and then Bischoff is the one who fires Ole, and that's it for Ole, because he's trying to get his son going, Bryant Anderson, and WCW fired him, and he wanted Jim Cornette to take a look at him, but Bischoff didn't like Cornette. And when he found out Cornette was talking to Ole, he fired Ole, and that was it for Ole. But those last couple years, 89, 90, he was, the Horseman turned on Sting for the 9,000th time, and Ole cuts a great promo during all of that too. If you go back and watch that angle, and Ole, he reforms his team with Arn in 89 and 90, and they do all the, this is when the Sting's part of the Horsemen. They're feuding with the J-Tex, Buzz Sawyer and the Muda and the Dragon Master and those fucking guys, and the Gary Hart stuff where he was on the other side of the Horsemen, which, 1990 wasn't a good year by any means. But again, I like rewatching all that stuff. I think it's entertaining wrestling to watch. And then obviously the Horsemen turn on Sting and jump him and all that. And
That's a great promo too, man. That's another great. It's a great Ole promo where again he gets in the ring and he's like, "Listen up, Sting," with his gravelly, like he's chewing glass before he got out there.
Yeah,
just again very deliberate. He's just like, I know you don't want to hear it, but you got to hear it, buddy. Like,
yeah,
and basically saying we're gonna, you can't be a part of the Horsemen anymore because you're not going to give up your title shot and listen here, pal, and look at me when I'm talking to you. It's just like the way that it's done is just. It's again a very well done, very logical turn where the Horsemen are just like, "We'll give up your title shot," and Sting's like, "No," and then they're like, "Well, then you're out of here. Like, we're not going to let you fight Ric Flair for the title. Like, fuck off. No, you either give up that title shot or we're going to beat your ass." And he keeps telling Sting because Sting keeps going all over the ring and he goes, "Listen up, pal. We have 3 and you're 1." So
yeah, that's the great line where Sting's trying to like speak up and he's like, "Sting, there's 3 of us and 1 of you, so you're gonna listen."
Yeah, so you're gonna sit there tight and listen to me explain what's gonna happen here. It's so good.
It's so good. It's so fucking good. And he's winding down at that point, and he doesn't wrestle much after that. And the different bookers do different things with him. He's a referee for a while, and he's in the office, but he's not really the booker. And I guess he's part of some of the booking committees in between guys getting fired and let go and all that during that period. But essentially, once Bischoff lets him go for associating with Cornette, that's it. He's done. And then he becomes bitter old, cantankerous Ole Anderson doing shoot interviews for the rest of his career.
Yeah, for the next 15 years doing shoot interviews and burying everybody. It's funny. I was looking at his Wikipedia page earlier, and it said notable for his let me see if I can get it up. It was like notable for his criticisms of, and they listed like 20 guys. It was just like, it's so here. Good. Anderson was also very vocal about his personal issues with Vince McMahon, Dusty Rhodes, Michael Hayes, Paul Heyman, Eric Bischoff, Tony Blanchard, Jim Herd, Roddy Piper, and Brewster Brody. And it's just like you could let that list if they wanted to. If anybody wanted to do the Wikipedia entry, that list could be 1,000 people deep. Everybody that he dealt with ever, you could add to that list. Ric Flair, he notably did not like Ric Flair. It's like, how do you not like you're Ole Anderson? How do you not like Ric Flair? Didn't like Ric Flair.
Well, again, here's the thing. He wasn't totally wrong about Flair because one of his big criticisms of Flair was that Flair would go out there and have the same match every night.
Yeah.
And can you say he's wrong?
He's not wrong.
He would often say about Flair, he'd say, "Flair, he's a great wrestler. I'm not denying he's a great wrestler, but we have this whole canvas to work with." And Ric Flair would go out there and have the same fucking match every night. And he would say he'd say to the interviewers, the Flair spot where he goes into the turnbuckle and flips over and then runs down the apron, and he'd set up the interviewer, and the interviewer would always go, "Oh, yeah." He's like, "Of course you do, because he did it every fucking night." And he's like, he'd have the same match all the time. "Of course you know all the spots, because he would do them every fucking night." So he had issues. And look, he wasn't wrong. That was a criticism of Flair from the Smark fans and the newsletters, even while Flair was the best wrestler in the world, and why didn't Ole like that? Because what did we talk about at the top? He wanted realism, and he felt like if you went out there and had the same fucking pattern match every night, you were exposing the business. Was that a little old school to think that way? Was he wrong in the sense that if it's over, it's over? Yeah, but you can see where his ideals were rooted.
Right.
With some of this wacky shit that he thought. Now, there's no question he was an asshole. Okay, this is a guy. He's the only guy who didn't think Sting was going to be a big star. He's the only guy in the world who didn't think Ricky Steamboat could be a top guy. He was insisting that Hulk Hogan couldn't draw
in this is in 1989. He's like, he sells dolls, but he doesn't know how to get people to the building. And it's like, what?
They're not selling any tickets over there. Yeah,
up north, they're not selling any tickets. Ole, I don't know about that.
But he wasn't. But again, he wasn't wrong about everything.
Yeah.
When I go back and watch those old shoots, for as many times as you're shaking your head and you're going, "Ole, you fucking lost the plot," there's a million other times where you're nodding along, going, "You know what, Ole? That's a good point. You make a fucking solid point." There are times where he makes some solid points. And there's a really fun interview he does with Ricky Morton of all people, because Ricky Morton, he's as amicable as anyone. He's just. And Ole's just being Ole, and Ricky's just laughing and shaking his head, But and he's one of the most interesting figures of his time and his era, and he's another one of these guys where you can just find him at the center of a lot of the most memorable angles that took place during the course of his career, whether it was turning on Dusty or kicking Sting out of the Horseman, or all those great Horseman angles, and all those great promos. It's look, Flair has a certain promo style. Arn Anderson's a fucking incredible promo. Tully was a pretty good promo. J.J. Dillon, of course, but when the Horsemen needed to make a point, Ole did the talking. Ole did the talking when something needed to be explained. Ole did the talking, he not only was right there with all of those, with your Arns and your Flairs in terms of talk, he's just as good as anyone, especially in his style of promo, when it came to laying out details, explaining something, getting right to the point, and establishing and explaining a grudge. I mean, geez, if you're a young wrestler and you're not watching his promos, I don't know what to tell you. It's just, so Ole's a guy who, I guess, to wrap it up on my end, and you can say whatever you want to say. I talked about how when I was a kid, I had no appreciation for him because he didn't have any appeal to a fucking 8-year-old. But as I got older, as I got more into wrestling, he's one of those wrestlers that just absolutely grew on me to the point where once I became an adult and really dug deep on pro wrestling, he has become one of my favorite people to watch, both on the stick and in the ring. And obviously the shoot interviews are fucking classics. And listening to him just complain and be angry and just be preposterous and be Ole, there's entertainment value in that. Him going on Dave Meltzer's IATA radio show to sell his book,
yelling
and then just yelling at Dave, and then just arguing with Dave. That's Ole.
Getting pissed that he's not in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. Like my kind of a guy that really, really, really cares about the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame and is pissed that he's not in it, because of course he's pissed that he's not in it. Like we say sometimes it's good. We feel like dorks because we care a lot, but it's really good that we care a lot, and more people should care. This dude cared about the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame and was pissed that Dave didn't put him in his Hall of Fame. And Dave so many times tried to explain, Ole, I don't choose who goes in. It's a panel. People vote on it. Dave, you don't want me in your Hall of Fame.
I don't know if he cared so much about being in it as he cared so much about, he wanted to use that as a point that Dave didn't know what the fuck he was talking about.
Right.
Was trying, who knows?
Yeah, you're right. Maybe he didn't actually care about the Hall of Fame, more that you're a fucking idiot,
more,
Dave. You don't know
shit if I'm not in your Hall of, it's more like that kind
right.
of thing.
I guess you're right.
If I'm not in it, then you're a fucking idiot and you don't know shit,
Dave talked about it earlier. It said, Ole came onto our podcast to try to sell books, and I don't think he sold a single book because he just did the whole time.
Yeah, he yelled at him and argued with him for 40 minutes. It was, it's out there. It's easy to find.
It's on Wrestling Observer Live. Yeah, I think it was hosted. Alvarez was there too, right? Wasn't it all of them?
Wasn't IATA? No, I think it was IATA.
Oh, it was during the IATA days. You're right. Yes, it was during the
IATA days, which for you kids out there, Dave Meltzer's been doing what we now call streaming podcasts for as long as anyone. That was a failed business venture that he got hired for. What would you even call IATA? Like an internet radio?
Streaming, it was like a streaming internet radio thing that just went up in flames during the 2000s, the .com bubble. It was one of the many .com bubbles. Obviously you have Mark Cuban's radio.com. He sold that to Yahoo for what he's still, ungodly amounts of money that he's still living with today, and was able to parlay that into more money and more money and more money. And IATA had a similar idea. We're going to do streaming radio on the internet or whatever. And it makes all the sense in the world. And they spent a lot of money, and then very quickly it's
too soon. Yeah. It was too soon.
Yeah.
It was just too soon, and or is it? Because all these podcast publishers aren't exactly fucking,
They're dropping like flies. They're dropping like flies these days, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So, anything else on? You got anything else on? I
will say, I agree with you that he's a guy who has grown on me over the years. His work has really grown on me. Obviously, a very complicated legacy of Ole Anderson. We mentioned at the top, like an all-time asshole. The Ringer has a really good piece up right now talking about his very, very well documented racism as well. That is. And they kind of lay it out a little bit where a lot of the people that were involved at the time were like, no, that's just the times. And, oh, no, he's not really a racist. That's just kind of the times or whatever. But, they have all the quotes in there. And some of the quotes are pretty shocking, the stuff that he says. And you could take it for whatever it's worth. You know what I mean? Of is that, of what the times and that's just what things, that's just what guys said in the 80s or whatever. That's just what people said to each other in the 80s, or are those actual, so the Ringer article, I think, does a very good job of kind of laying that out and laying out, that yes, it was a time and a place, but still this guy had some pretty horrific things to say about people of other races. So that's all laid out in the Ringer. So I think they do a good job of discussing his legacy as well as some of the warts, the many, many warts that he had as well. But I just thought I'd mention that too, along with being the all-time asshole, like we said. So there you go. That is Ole Anderson, and I think let's move on right now because we're here. And you mentioned a little bit earlier, let's talk about Royal Rumble 1991 and Mike Jones, also known to the world as Virgil. Yeah, there you go. I love that. I'm glad you knew that. 2816. I'm so glad you knew that, Joe. I'm kind of surprised by you.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm surprised by you. A little back then. I appreciate that, Joe. Do you know the phone number? Do you remember the phone number?
Listen, I know things, Do
you remember the phone number?
Gimmick to maintain, but
do you remember the phone number? I do.
Again, Rich, I don't even know what you're talking about.
281-330-8004.
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Mike Jones up on the low.
Who?
Mike Jones about to blow. Yeah. All right. So I know I thought I was going to be the one to do that. You were going to say Mike Jones, and under my breath, I was going to say who. And I'm glad I had no idea this was going to flip the other way, and I'm so glad. I am smiling from ear to ear.
Full of surprises.
That you got that. I am so the glee. I can't even describe the glee that I have on my face right now that you are doing a Mike Jones reference here. But Virgil, Vincent, Shane, Curly Bill, Soul Train Jones, his career, and this is a weird one too, where we were always in this weird position where when people pass away, people expect us to come and do these obituaries like we just did for Ole Anderson, like an hour long, talking about how great this guy was and underrated aspects of this guy's career, and here's something you might not have known, and here's and that sort of stuff. And then sometimes people pass away, and it's like you're like, oh, I can't wait to hear what you're going to say about Virgil, and it's like, what do you want me to say about Virgil, really? I mean, I'll describe his career, but he was terrible as a wrestler. He's one of the worst wrestlers you'll ever see. So it's like, and the guy just died. I don't want to piss on the guy's grave or whatever. So I'm always in this very weird position of how do we cover this guy if I really don't have that much good things to say about him. But we'll do it anyway because the man passed away and he had a long career in wrestling, so it's worth discussing. But he starts off as Soul Train Jones, mostly doing, I believe he's trained by Afa, isn't it? Afa and Sika, I believe he was trained by, and starts up in Memphis as Soul Train Jones, which was essentially an Apollo Creed gimmick, right? Because he had like the red, white, and blue trunks, and he was kind of doing a boxer thing. Like I always looked at Soul Train Jones as like a dollar store Apollo Creed. I think that's kind of what they were going for, right?
And it was 1987. That's exactly what it was. He was teaming with Rocky Johnson. That's probably what he's most known for in Memphis, the team with Rocky Johnson. But I went back and dug into some of my old newsletters from the period. He was considered a bit of a prospect, believe it or not, because he had a great look.
Oh, he looked like $1 million, and you could see it.
And you never know how someone's work is going to come along. And look, he wasn't a great worker. I'll tell you this. I watched a match today. I had to click it. 1994. So this is the tail end of his WWF run. Virgil, 3 years removed from the turn, so he's not over anymore.
Yeah,
he was over when he turned.
Absolutely.
Now, he was over when he turned. But this is 1994. He's not over. He's not being pushed. And he was facing corporation-era Nikolai Volkov, who had to be pushing 50.
Yeah.
Okay. How old was Nikolai Volkov in 1994?
Nikolai Volkov in 1994. I'll get that for you. I'll get that for you while I describe.
So anyway, let me talk about this match.
Well, he was born in 1947, so he's 47 years old. Yeah, almost 50.
And Nikolai was never exactly an exciting athlete.
No, even in his youth. Certainly not in 1994.
Not as a Mongol, not as Nikolai Volkov, not as, or was he a Mongol or an executioner? I always get that mixed up. Big John Studd was an executioner with Kowalski. Volkov was a Mongol. He was Beppo Mongol, wasn't he?
That I don't know.
He was one half of the Mongols. He was Beppo Mongol. I'm almost positive. If you could pull that up too while I'm talking about this match. Because I get the Mongols sometimes confused with the Executioners, but the Executioners
he was both. He was Executioner number 3 as well as Beppo Mongol.
Oh, well, maybe that's why.
Yeah, Executioner number 3 and Beppo Mongol.
Okay, but obviously he was more famous as one half of the Mongols. Right, is the point. Because the more famous Executioner pairing was John Studd and Kowalski, right? And I guess Volkov was a interchangeable member at some point because he was big like they were. So maybe that was the idea where he would put on the. Anyway, the point is, Volkov was never like considered a good worker ever, not in his youth, not ever. So I'm thinking to myself, this is late stage Nikolai Volkov and 3 years removed from being over Virgil, and it was 7 minutes long. I have to watch this, right? It's not like it's 3 minutes. It was really not that bad. Like, I was stunned by how not bad it was. Like, I'm not going to tell you it was good, but you're probably thinking, Rich.
That sounds like a horrific match, yes.
That sounds like one of the worst matches you could ever watch. You know, Volkov out there with his property of the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase.
And his weird dark hair, his weird dyed black hair, yeah.
And DiBiase on the outside, and you know, Virgil not being over at all, you know, but it really wasn't that terrible. Virgil did some things that were okay. He had a nice little drop kick. You could tell at one point he was a good athlete, right? I think he was a college athlete. He even had that same kind of boxing gimmick after he turned on DiBiase, right? He kind of had, it was sort of a boxing. He would kind of like move around the ring like a boxer.
You're right. He'd shuffle his feet. He'd do the Ali shuffle, and then he'd do these not very good punches or whatever. And that's kind of what that's what his quote unquote babyface offense was, him shuffling around and punching basically. And
jabbing you in the face. Yeah. So he was, though, getting back to what I was saying, considered a bit of a prospect based on his look and, you know, working with Rocky Johnson and all that. So he comes into the WWF as a pretty green rookie at that point, maybe only 2 or 3 years into his career, to do the bodyguard gimmick for Ted DiBiase, obviously as a send-up of Dusty Rhodes with the name Virgil, you know, because at the time Jim Crockett Promotions was hot, and Dusty was the booker, so they were mocking Dusty Rhodes. The other thing at the time is there, you know, was some racism rooted in this, because the idea was Dusty Rhodes was like, sort of had, the idea was he was sort of used black vernacular in his promos and things like that. So the idea was Vince was mocking Dusty by naming a black slave after him.
Right. And yeah, you said bodyguard there, and let's call it what it is.
What it is. Yeah.
He was his man.
He was a servant.
Right.
Yeah. And you know, again, Vince McMahon, you know, I see all these brave takes now of people saying, oh, Vince McMahon, the wrestling's so much better now that he's gone. Well, where were you the last 4 decades? Because I know where I was.
Right. Yeah, we've been here. Here.
Where were you after the McAfee interview? Probably backpacking McAfee and laughing about working out at 2 a.m. is probably where you were. Okay. No one in specific.
Just talking in terms. Just talking. You know.
But but that was the idea behind the gimmick. And you know what's sad about
Bruce Pritchard says it wasn't named after Dusty Rhodes.
Well, and again,
he's a moron.
And that is why, unfortunately, the Bruce Pritchard podcast with Conrad is fucking useless.
I will say
it's useless.
At every clip I've heard, when he says that, Conrad says, "You're full of shit, Bruce. Shut the fuck up." It was obviously Dusty Rhodes, because it's like, it's laughable to us. No. We just called him. Okay, name every other Virgil that you guys have ever interacted with in your entire life that wasn't Dusty Rhodes. It's like, fuck off. Of course we know what the thing was. So he can say it. Every other person that said, I think Bobby Heenan has said, yeah, I said that is what his name should be. Everybody on earth agrees that he was named Virgil because of Dusty Rhodes. Everybody on earth except for Bruce Pritchard.
It's preposterous. And that's the problem with Bruce Pritchard and why you can't take his podcast seriously. Because even if, because how can I believe anything he says that I wasn't, like, if he tells a story that I wasn't aware of, how can I take it seriously when he's willing to lie about things like that? And that's hardly the only thing. It's a shame. It really is a shame. But it to me, his podcast is utterly worthless. But so the thing about what's sad about Mike Jones is he was essentially a main event act in the WWF for what, 3 or 4 years. You know, DiBiase wasn't a main eventer by 90 or 91 when the term, but DiBiase was a main eventer from when he entered the company, you know, through like 89, right?
Oh yeah.
And Virgil was essentially in the manager role and working the main events and making main event money. And, you know,
synonymous
managers
with the character too. It's synonymous with the character. You don't think of the $1 Million Man without thinking of Virgil right by his side.
Without Virgil. Yeah. And, you know, those guys make fucking main event. They might not make the same money as Hogan and DiBiase when they have a match, but you're in the main event, you're making main event money and getting main event payoffs. And then he had another 3 or 4 year run with the company where I'm sure he was making some decent change when he was the babyface prelim wrestler. And then he had a 4-year run in WCW where they were overpaying everybody. And my point here is he definitely made good money.
Oh God, yes.
For a lot of years. And it's unfortunate because at the end of his life, he was basically living in squalor, and then he got sick, and, you know, he had a host of other problems. And we all have if you've met Virgil or had a run, you have a Virgil story. I mean, I met Virgil at one of the WrestleMania weekends. I don't remember what city. I think it was at a Janela show before, I think because he was in the fucking clusterfuck, but before the clusterfuck, he's standing there with me and Justin Bissonnette, and I can't remember who else. There were other people there, and we're just standing there with Virgil, hanging out with Virgil, and you could, you know, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was very obvious the man was not sober. He had probably been drinking for the entire weekend at that point and was just oozing fucking alcohol out of his pores.
I think this is in New Orleans, and yeah, it's a bad place to be a man who yeah, yeah, I'm sure.
Might have been New Orleans. Again, I don't remember what city, and I remember at that time Patreon had the lens gimmick, and I wanted to get him on the lens, and I was like, hey, man, you want to do like a 15-second silly promo or something? And he's like, my rate's $150. And I was like, well,
I remember getting this text from you and said, holy shit, I'm going to get Virgil on the lens. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. You're like, I'm talking to him right now. I'm going to get him. I'm like, yeah, do it. And he said, fuck, he wants to charge me $150. Fuck him.
Well, yeah, whatever it was. I don't even remember the exact total, but
I think it was like $250 or something like that. It was a preposterous number. And you were like, should I do it? And I'm like, no, get out of here. No way.
For the sake of the story, he's like, my rate's $150. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not Virgil. I'm not going to pay $150. He goes, my rate's $50. And I'm like, I'm not paying you $50. Like, it kept coming down. But I wasn't going to pay him anything. Like, I'm not paying Virgil to do a 15-second drunken promo on the lens. But he did stand there and watch the show with us. And someone was like, just film him anyway. He doesn't know what's going on. But I was like, I'm not going to do that because, you know, people are going to get mad that it's like not with his consent and all that. And I'm not, that was the height of getting canceled and shit. And I'm like, I'm not filming this guy without his consent, even if it's harmless. But it's just not worth the trouble. But yeah, I mean, that's, you know, anyone who met him during that kind of era of his career, and Joey Janela really took a liking to him and took him under his wing and kind of gave him a little revival at the end with the club. I think that same year, Alabama Doink was in the clusterfuck because he had a table set up. So maybe it was New Orleans. I don't know. He's dead too. Alabama Doink died a couple of years.
Did he? I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, Alabama Doink passed away. Yeah, he's also dead. But yeah, what's getting back? I just think it's, you know, it's kind of a tragic story because he obviously, you know, had a lot of money at some point because those were big money making years. He was there for the Hulkamania era. He was there when WCW was paying Lanny Poffo 6 figures to stay home. I mean, you know, and the end of his life just didn't seem like it was very great. He became a meme, you know, on Twitter and everything, but and he had some handlers who were trying to help him out, but you know, unlike the Iron Sheik, I don't know if it was all entirely unbeknownst to him because when he would do interviews and talking things, he would bring up the Olive Garden and talk about the meat sauce and fuck money.
He became self-aware.
Yeah, right. He was aware of the memes, and he was aware that he was a meme. So he might have been genuinely behind all that stuff for all I know. I don't know. Joey, we probably should have asked Janela before we did this, but who are we to prepare for a show? But yeah, I just think it was you know, it's kind of sad how it turned out for him, but you know, he had the great main event run as Virgil, and say what you want about the genesis of the character and the intentions behind it and Vince McMahon being Vince McMahon, but he was excellent in the role in a vacuum. He had the great scowl. You know, he always looked like a mean motherfucker.
Right. With the scowl, counting the money, flexing, looked like $1 million with his little vest, the money in his hands.
Interfered at the right time.
Yep.
Had good timing with his shit. A lot of times he would take the bumps for DiBiase. It would be his job to take the big bumps at the end of a match or whatever. So DiBiase would keep his heat. If DiBiase was injured or banged up, Virgil would step in and wrestle the match. I saw a match from Boston Garden in 1988 today. Virgil versus Junkyard Dog. And again, Rich, I thought it was going to be the biggest piece of shit that I ever watched. A 3-minute Virgil versus 1988 Junkyard Dog.
Yeah, that doesn't sound great, but it turned out to be all right.
No, it was absolute.
Okay,
this one did suck.
That seems like that.
Yeah.
I have a tough time believing that was any good.
The Volkov match exceeded expectations. This one did not. This one was pretty brutal.
Perfectly met your expectations of 1988 JYD and 2 years into the business, Mike Jones, Virgil. Yeah,
in a 3-minute match in Boston Garden with Gorilla Monsoon, the Duke of Dorchester, Pete Doherty, and Nick Bockwinkel on the call. So that was Monsoon complaining about DiBiase costing. Virgil went over, by the way, which was also surprising. DiBiase hit Junkyard Dog with his crutch or whatever the fuck they did, right? And Monsoon complaining and the Duke of Dorchester said, I think that JYD got what was coming to him. And, Nick Bockwinkel in his erudite style going, well, that's one way of looking at it, Gorilla, but the referee has the final say. It all matters when it comes to the squared circle. And it's just the commentary was 1,000 times better than the match.
Right, sounds better, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you have these 3 completely different personalities calling this thing, and Gorilla is surrounded by 2 heels in this case, as opposed to just, Jesse Ventura or whatever. But yeah, so, they did the big turn in 91 at the Royal Rumble, where after building it up now, listen, you go back and watch a lot of old DiBiase promos. Like, remember when DiBiase tried to buy Hercules from Bobby Heenan and make him a slave?
Oh, of course,
right?
Yeah.
So they were wise to never use that term for Virgil. They never went that far, right? But they used it for Hercules. And Hercules was like, well, fuck that. I'm not going to be this guy's fucking slave. And that's how Hercules went babyface. So there's a match from Saturday night's main event, Hercules versus Virgil. And the idea was it was supposed to be Hercules versus Ted DiBiase, but DiBiase's promo, he's like, much like Donald Trump doesn't wash his own windows on Trump Towers, and much like, naming some other rich guy who has someone else do something for him, I'm not putting my hands on that dirty, disgusting Hercules. I have a servant for that, Virgil, and he's going to wrestle him tonight. But go back and watch that promo.
Mm-hmm.
And the look that Virgil gives them.
Right, they built that up. They built that up for like 2 years or whatever. You could see Virgil since day one. Virgil was never. They told him, and it must have been a very deliberate thing. And again, these things used to matter, and logic used to matter, and things used to matter.
Yeah,
and from day one, something would happen. Virgil would get pushed to his absolute limit, and he would have a face or something like that. And I forget what it was, but Ted DiBiase basically said, well, you want to pay for your mother's surgeries, or I forget what it was exactly. It was something like that. You know what I mean? It was something about his family. Yeah, he had to take care of his family or whatever. He goes, oh, you don't want your family out on the streets, do you? And then Virgil would begrudgingly do it. And then, they'd make up and they'd be fine over the next couple of weeks or whatever. But little bits and pieces here and there would lead up to, Virgil making a face or whatever. And then eventually led up to this moment at Royal Rumble 91 where, DiBiase just starts slapping the guy and telling him, go pick up my belt, throws the belt on the ground, tells him to go pick up the belt, and eventually Virgil picks up the belt, hits DiBiase over the head with it, turns on him, and that leads to a match at WrestleMania that is not very. I watched that match earlier. It's not very good either because it just
and then he wins the $1 million title at SummerSlam. They do, and then they face. Then they're on opposite sides at Survivor Series. The feud lasted all year.
Yeah.
The feud but even long before the feud, Virgil would side-eye DiBiase when he would go too far in running him down or talking about him. Starting about, I would say, 88, 89 is when that all started, where they would start planting seeds. Because the idea was eventually he was going to turn on him. And they made you wait years and years. Very similar to Wardlow MJF, except they waited even longer in this case than they did with Wardlow and MJF. Would they wait like 3 years or something like that? This one, they probably waited 5 years or whatever the case was to do the turn. And then they did it at the Royal Rumble match, which was Dusty's last match, Dusty and Dustin versus DiBiase. And you just talked about the post-match where DiBiase was like, think about your mother, think about your family. But they do the turn, it gets the big pop, and Virgil's over. I mean, he's over in 1991. There's no doubt about it. And you know, they have the match at WrestleMania, they have the match at SummerSlam. He wins the $1 million belt. But then after that, what are you supposed to do with this guy? He's
right,
not
there was nothing
worker.
else. Yeah, not a good promo either. Not a good worker.
Yeah, awful promo. He was a terrible promo. Some of his promos are just all-time bad stuff.
There's one where Yokozuna beats him at, I believe, I think it's Survivor Series 1992. And that's when they're trying to build up Yoko to get him ready for the Royal Rumble, and he's going to win it or whatever. So he squashes Virgil in like a minute. And I remember they go to the back, and I forget if it was Lord Alfred or who was interviewing, or Sean Mooney or whatever. And Virgil's like, "Oh man, that Yokozuna man, he beat me up good." It's just like, it's so bad.
Names. It's really bad.
It's like he doesn't know his name. He's just like, I tell you, the World Wrestling Federation better watch out for Yokozuna, man. He's going to come and he's going to beat all of y'all. And it's like, what is going on? It's so bad.
Yeah.
He was not a good promo.
Yeah. He was not a good promo at all. He couldn't talk. And after that feud wound down, they used him to put over new heels. Like they bring in Repo Man and he'd lose the Repo Man. They bring in Nails, he'd lose to Nails. They bring in, whoever the newest heel was. Yokozuna, and the other thing where you knew he wasn't really getting pushed anymore is they stopped booking him on pay-per-views with the exception of the Royal Rumble because you needed 30 fucking guys. So, and then when he was on pay-per-view, it would always be putting people over. Yokozuna at Survivor Series, or I know he lost to Nails on some fucking pay-per-view during that era too. So,
SummerSlam, I think it was SummerSlam 92. He lost to Nails to build up for Nails versus Big Boss Man.
Yeah, and then at that point, he was just a prelim guy on the roster who they kept around, and sometimes you wouldn't see him on TV for ages, and then you'd see him at the Rumble and remember he was employed, but he'd be on shows like Mania, like the C shows of the time, and shit like that, usually losing to one of these heels. And then towards the end, what happened to him is the same thing that happens to a lot of guys at the end of their run in that company. He even went as far as becoming a dude who, on the syndicated shows, he would be the other partner in a jobber tag team against a push tag team. Like he'd be the guy that wouldn't get pinned, but he would be teaming with some jobber. And, he would start the match and get some offense and then tag out, and then the jobber would lose. And that's when you really know you're cooked in that company during that era, when they're using you in that role. And, that Nikolai Volkov match I talked about, that was his final program in the company. And they were even putting, Nikolai Volkov wasn't beating anybody in those days. And Virgil was even losing the feud to Nikolai. Like Nikolai was beating Virgil like a drum and beating him on TV. And that was really it for him. He wrapped it up in 94. And he didn't pop up again until a couple of years later when WCW brought him in as Vincent.
Yeah, deep into the NWO. Not deep into the NWO. It was still very early NWO. I think at that point it was Hogan, Hall, Nash, Six, Giant, DiBiase, and then the next guy was Vincent, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And obviously Vincent, and when you watch the promo, it's kind of funny. I watched his debut earlier today, and Eric Bischoff is at the commentary. He's still WCW commentator, Eric Bischoff, this time. He hadn't joined the NWO or whatever. And all the NWO guys go, hey, Scott Hall goes, I want you to do our newest member, Vince. And everyone goes, where's Vince? Where's Vince? And Eric Bischoff goes, Vincent, where's Vincent? Because obviously they wanted it to be Vincent. They didn't want it to be Vince. But none of the other NWO guys got that. They all thought they were calling him Vince. So Hulk Hogan goes, here's Vince, brother. It's like Hall's like, where's Vince? And it's like, no, Vincent. And you come here to Eric Bischoff, be like, what do you mean, Vincent? Where's Vincent? Who's Vincent? And he comes out.
So it's obviously Bischoff's idea, and calling him Vince was too on the nose.
Exactly. So he's like, no, Vincent? Is his name Vincent? Is that the guy's name, Vincent? And they're like, all right, Vince, bro. All right, guy, I'm trying to call him Vince. So then, he comes out and he's quote unquote the bodyguard or whatever. And he was less in the NWO and in WCW. He was no longer the manservant, Vincent. He was just whatever. He was just a guy in the background.
He was like their job guy. He would take their bumps. He was there to take their bumps. Baby faces would beat him up.
And remarkably, as you mentioned, like remarkable lack of pay-per-view matches for Virgil, Vincent, whatever. So he in WCW was in 2 pay-per-views that were not the World War III Battle Royal in his entire time there, from 1996 until I think late 1999.
2000. He was there in 2000.
Yeah, Curly Bill. Yeah, he did his run as Curly Bill for a little bit.
Yeah.
Starrcade 1997, he teams with Randy Savage and Scott Norton against Ray Traylor and the Steiner Brothers. And then uncensored 1999, Stevie Ray versus Vincent in a Harlem Street fight.
Oh.
Joe, go back and watch that match. I will. I am very sure that one is as bad as I remember it. That is not very good. But then he stuck around for a long time there. He at one point became Shane. Get it? Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mm. And then he became Curly Bill, a member of the West Texas Rednecks, and then that was it for.
Because the joke is he's a black guy in the West Texas Rednecks, and then he even worked as Mike Jones at the end. So
did he have a run as Mike Jones there in WCW?
Wow. Now I have no recollection of it.
I don't remember that at all.
Most definitely checked out by then, but it looks like he lost to Tank Abbott on Thunder. And
damn, I don't remember the Mike Jones era. I remember the Shane era. I do not remember Mike Jones era. But there you go.
Yeah, working as Mike Jones. So they try a little bit of everything with him. But yeah, that's Mike Jones / Virgil / Vincent. A constant figure on television during some of the most popular eras of pro wrestling.
Yeah. Drew 101
ever seen.
Drew 101 from our Discord put it perfectly. He's wrestling Forrest Gump. He's there for everything.
Yeah.
He's there for all of Hulkamania, the post Hulkamania, the thick of the Attitude Era, the downslope of that, and then the irony
Monday
indie era. He's hanging around too. And he was in AEW. Yeah. Remember when he was in AEW at the beginning with doing a Dynamite stuff with the Inner Circle?
Janela got him in. Yeah. Janela got him in to cut a promo on TV, or pre-tape anyway. But he just checked out there for a couple years, those terrible years in the mid '90s where nothing was going on anyway, and then WCW brought him back at the height of their business. So that is Virgil. Anything else on Virgil?
Nothing else on Virgil. So rest in peace to.
Oh, he did have a gigantic penis, verified by anyone who ever saw it.
Yeah, well known. Yes, Lanny Poffo era, like he's in that realm, right? The
just an enormous penis, just packing heat
good
by every account. Yes, a Too Cold Scorpio like enormous.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking Scorpio level here.
Yeah.
So Lanny Poffo, who are the all-time
those are Scorpio and Virgil are the two I always hear.
Scorpio, Virgil,
Poffo, obviously,
Lanny Poffo, but Lanny Poffo is more the flexibility help. I'm sure that you got to have a pretty good.
It's got to be a combo. It's got to be a combo
to do what Lanny Poffo did. You got to have flexibility, and you got to have a pretty big. And then
you need help on both ends.
Right.
It's like when you bet an over in a football game, both teams have to score. You need a little help on both ends.
You definitely do. And then who else would be like your to round it out? Ron Fuller, right? Not Ron Fuller. No.
Rob
Fuller. Rob Fuller is well known as the big hog.
Rob Fuller has the big hog.
Yeah.
That's probably your
That's
Mount
the pantheon,
Rushmore.
right? That's the Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling dicks, right?
That's the Mount Rushmore of gigantic pro wrestling dicks. Would be those 4 guys, I think. Would have to be it. Are we forgetting anyone obvious? I don't think
Scorp, so. Virgil, Lanny, and Rob Fuller. No, that's my list.
That's it. It's got to be it. Yeah.
Feel free to chime in the chat room if you'd like, but
hell yes, and I'm sure they will because they're a bunch of psychopaths.
People are bringing up Batista. I don't know. That one was always.
That's a meme.
That's a meme. That's a meme.
I don't buy it.
We're talking real. I mean, these guys are well known.
These are legitimate giant hogs.
Right.
Okay, I don't want to hear about your memes.
Yeah, get your memes out of here. This is serious shit here. Anyway, so that is Ole and that is Virgil and Joe. That's it for the flagship. We're at 2 hours and 30 minutes. No, we got a few more topics to get to. I don't know how we're gonna get to. I think we're gonna have to do an overrun for this one. I think. Where are you at?
There's no doubt about it.
No doubt about it. Let's do AEW. Let's do AEW for sure.
AEW, we got to get in.
I think we're going to have to, WWE Elimination Chamber, Maxxine Duprigate, Observer Awards, New Japan. I think you're overrun, unfortunately.
People already heard your take on Elimination Chamber. People already heard my take on the Observer Awards, so we could push those off of this show and onto a potential overrun. We got to preview Revolution.
We cannot skip AEW Revolution and Sting's last match. That can't go to the overrun. So
right, that we have to do. Everything else is going to get pushed.
Right. So let's do that. By the way,
how long this takes.
Absolutely. So AEW Revolution coming up this Sunday. Again, make sure you subscribe to our Patreon, $10 tier, flagship patreon.com, patreon.com/voicesofwrestling, voicesofwrestling.com/Patreon, however you want to do it. $10 tier, instant reaction live immediately following the show, so make sure you subscribe and you are ready to go for when the show ends, and we'll go live about 5-10 minutes or so after the show. But it looks like a hell of a card on paper, and that's, not including the fact that you're going to be able to see Sting's final match. And that match, which should main event, will probably main event.
If you subscribe for that instant reaction, okay, you're going to get Rich's audio review of the Elimination Chamber, and you're going to get my 90-plus minutes of the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame breakdown, okay, which are two pieces of audio that everybody seemed to enjoy a lot. And we've got some stuff in the works that, I'm not going to sit here and do some kind of hard sell, cheesy fucking tease. I'm not going to do Mean Gene with the 900 line. But there's potentially some stuff coming in March that's very interesting, too, that you're going to probably want to be subscribed for as well. So, we're still working out the details on some of it, but there's a lot of content coming. But anyway, first piece of business is this Sunday, AEW Revolution Instant Reaction Live, $10 tier.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Cannot wait for that. Yeah. Always. No. And that's always our most popular show. Chat room's always really lively as well. So it's a really cool time if you can be there live, I really do recommend being there live. And obviously you can listen to the replay on the Patreon as well. We put it up in audio file for everybody on the $10 tier as well. But if you can be there live, it's a hell of a time. The chat room's always buzzing. A lot of discussion about the matches, a lot of discussion about the show. So really recommend checking that out and being a part of the community on that pay-per-view post show as well. So that's coming up Sunday, of course, after Revolution and after what will be Sting's final match, which I'm hoping will be the main event here. AEW World Tag Team Title Tornado match. Darby Allin and Sting defending the titles against the Young Bucks, Matthew Jackson and Nicholas Jackson. I mean, the emotion of this match is going to be crazy. Greensboro, Sting. I mean, this is going to be an unbelievable moment. I can't wait for this match.
So what do you think? Do you think he does the JOB? What do you think?
I think, and I've kind of wrestled with this a lot, and we've talked about this when they booked this match, that I am positive the Young Bucks are going to get to the arena and say there's no way we're winning this match. And I'm sure Sting's going to get to the arena and say there's no way I'm winning this match, because that's not Sting's thing. He just had an article up on SI.com today where he got interviewed and said, I like losing. I don't like winning. I like to lose, all this sort of stuff. Like, losing's just as important as winning sometimes or whatever. So that's always been hit. He's like one of the most, selfless major stars in wrestling history. So he's not going to want to win. The Bucks aren't going to want to win. But I think that there's a way you can do this where Darby gets the pin. What you can do is it's a tornado tag, so guys are going to be all over the place. I think that the most obvious thing to do is Sting has one of the Bucks in a scorpion. Darby either does a coffin drop, or maybe Darby does a scorpion of his own, and one of the Jacksons taps out, and that's how the match ends. It doesn't have to necessarily be Sting hitting a scorpion death drop in the middle of the ring on Matt Jackson and pinning him for the 1-2-3. I think there's a way where he can be kind of a background guy, getting, having the move on, having the scorpion death lock on, and Darby ultimately gets the big pinfall, and Darby's the one that you're going to kind of put the spotlight on, because the Bucks are not going to want to win this match, and I don't think it's a good idea to have the Bucks win the match. That's too much heat. I don't think you need that kind of heat, but I think Darby getting the win is probably the best way to do it, because I don't think Sting, pinning. I don't think he's going to want to do that either. I think Sting would sort of be embarrassed about pinning a guy in the middle of the ring with a scorpion death drop on his retirement match. I don't think he would want to do that either.
Yeah. I think the way that also the feud's been built, that they'll retain and then just, abandon the titles is what they'll do. It would feel weird to have the Bucks win it. Do you think Flair turns on Sting one more time?
I mean, he already did kind of the fake. He kind of did the fake turn already on Dynamite.
Look, that angle on Dynamite was a mess. Flair's
a mess. You know what? I don't want any Flair in this match. Flair can be there at ringside. I don't want to get him involved.
The problem is he's going to be.
I don't want him involved physically. He can't do anything physically anymore.
The angle was a mess from the standpoint of it was totally illogical, but I get it. People wanted to see Sting repel from the ceiling, so no one cares, and I guess that's fine. But Flair wants to meet with the Bucks and then meets with them because he's all insulted and put off by Sting and Darby. The Bucks tell Renee that the meeting went well, and then Flair comes out and sides with Darby. I mean, what the fuck was that? You know what I mean? Are they saving Flair's turn for the pay-per-view? Because I understand you don't want to see it. Flair can't do anything, and he's 80 and all this. But he's obviously going to be involved in this.
He's going to be involved in something. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe one more turn, and then they kind of send him packing or something. I don't know. I kind of feel like what we saw. Oh, God. Lost a headphone there. There we go. Back? I'm back. All right, here we go. I think what we saw on Dynamite is probably what we need to kind of. I think he can be. If Flair wants to come out with Sting, that's fine. I don't think we need one more turn. I don't think we need anything physical with Flair. I think that would take away from the moment. I think he could be out there. Maybe he can stop Brandon Cutler. Maybe Brandon Cutler runs down and Flair chops Brandon Cutler or something like that. I would do something like that. Him getting in the ring and doing any sort of physical stuff to Sting, it looked preposterous to have the Bucks have to sell for this guy. You know what I mean? Like we're past that point with Flair. I think guy at ringside, chop Brandon Cutler. That's all we need. I think.
Yeah, you keep it simple. Sting thwarts an attempt of Flair screwing him again, which would be a nice way to cap it all off years of Flair screwing Sting and backstabbing him. And you keep it simple and Sting wins the match. You raise his hand and place goes nuts and you go off the air. I mean, keep it simple. Don't overthink this one. I can envision a scenario where Sting loses and it's fine, but why even fuck around? Just have him win the fucking match. The Bucks will be fine. Doesn't matter. It's not going to hurt them to lose this match. Everybody wants them to lose the match. So it can't hurt them.
And they want to lose the match, too, let's be honest. Those guys, they like losing, too. So
all right, so this three-way title match. So I didn't like the opening segments of Dynamite this week. I just think it's silly to have Adam Page have this convoluted plan.
It's just a lot of work. There's a lot of work to hit a guy with a crutch. Just hit a guy with a lot of weapon. Just hit a guy with something. Yeah.
To fake an injury the week before, to set up a crutch. What happens if Swerve doesn't come out? Your whole plan is foiled.
Right now you look like a doofus with your
ankle.
Not even
in the match.
Right.
You pulled out of the match.
Right. You pulled out of the match and your ankle's you're in a boot with crutches. And yeah, a lot of work to get to not that big of a payoff. So that was a raw ass segment. Is what that was.
I agree. The week Ole dies, the constructor of the Ole turn on Dusty, we get this raw ass segment to open up Dynamite. Find another way to hit that guy with the crutch. Then it just wasn't well thought out. But whatever. He's going to cost. I am more convinced than ever that Samoa Joe's retaining, and Hangman is just going to cost Swerve the title in some fashion. Either by sacrificing himself and letting Joe beat him in some manner, not letting him beat him with like a finger poke of doom scenario, but maybe absorbing a Samoa Joe move and it's something. I've seen a double submission scenario laid out where Hangman taps before Joe taps to ensure that that Joe's the winner, so Swerve doesn't. I've seen some scenarios laid out. They're going to do one of them. This is not the time to do the title change. I think this is if you want to put this title on Swerve, this is a bad time to do it because there's the whole Hangman thing is distracting. Mm-hmm. He's got to get past that first, and then be in a one-on-one match and win it in a big spot. He shouldn't win it in this messy scenario.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a lot of work to get to this three-way. I haven't loved the build at all for this three-way. I don't like three-ways, and I think this guy winning in a three-way would feel kind of cheap. You know what I mean?
Yes,
because I could see a scenario where he pins Hangman or whatever, and it's like Samoa Joe says, "Oh, you never pinned me for that," but then he immediately comes across as this kind of lesser champion, and I don't think you want to do that. And I think if you are turning Swerve babyface, which it seems all indications are that that's what they want to do, he should get a more triumphant win here. So I think maybe getting screwed out of this by Hangman, maybe he's basically got the pinfall ready or something. I don't know what you do, but I'm with you. I think Hangman has to do something where him and Hangman have to have one more match. He has to definitively put Hangman away and then go and face Joe and win the title there or whatever. I just don't like the idea of him winning the title in a three-way. I think I don't know. It's just every three-way, and this is why I don't like three-ways too, is it immediately comes across as cheap. If you win the title via a three-way, it just feels like it comes across cheap. Whereas, if a guy retains the title in a three-way, that's fine. The odds are against him because there's two guys and he could be pinned by, he doesn't have to get pinned and then he'll lose the title or whatever. Like that works for me. That's fine. But the idea of a guy winning a title in a three-way, I never love that. And especially if this is the big coronation for Swerve, this isn't a good time to do it.
No, this isn't a good time to do it. And not only that, this is Sting's night. He's not even going to have full attention on his title win. There's that aspect too. He should win the title when he's main eventing a pay-per-view or when they do a big television show and he's like a Grand Slam or something like that, where all of the attention is on him winning the title and ascending to the top of the card. Not in this dopey three-way with this silly sports entertainment story when Sting's retirement is going to be the headline the next day, not him winning the title.
What do you think about the idea that maybe Swerve has Joe pinned and Hangman comes from behind and tosses Swerve out and pins Joe to kind of solidify his heel turn?
My next point was going to be, now if you're going to do a title change here, it should be Hangman winning, not Swerve.
Via
and
nefarious cheating means.
Hangman.
Yeah, right.
And then it plays into the story of Hangman playing the keep away with this title from Swerve. Like, you're never going to get it. Now you have to go through me. And I'm never even going to give you a title shot. And, and Hangman can keep doing this crazy person routine who's on the brink of losing his reality because he doesn't want Strickland to win this title. I think you keep that going.
Yeah.
I don't even think that story has peaked yet. Like, that piece of the story.
I agree.
Has peaked yet. This is the wrong time for Swerve to win. I think this would be a mistake. Now, a lot of people would praise it because a lot of people want him to win the title, but I just think you need to wait for a better spot than
there's a better moment. I don't think he's going to get ice cold in the next month or two, but I think that you want his win.
There's always the risk.
There is always the risk, but I think if you got if you can construct a well laid out story, this guy could be even a bigger deal in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months when you eventually do this.
You know what else concerns me about all this? Every time these guys do an angle or a promo, Joe eats the other two for fucking lunch.
He does. Yeah, and that's the problem too, is do I want to take the title off of Joe? Because Joe's really fucking good as the champion. Really good.
I'm sorry, but Joe outshines both of these guys on the stick every time there's a promo. And this is not just a me opinion because I like Joe's promos better. And listen, it's not even any fault to those two. Those two guys are good on the stick. I don't have any beef with Hangman.
No, Joe's Joe, though. Joe's Joe.
Joe eats them up. And the crowds always pop biggest for Joe when he's done talking.
And those guys are so convoluted with the way they get to, and that's kind of one of the problems I have with Swerve's promos. It's one of the issues sometimes I have with Hangman's. Most of the time, Hangman's promos are fine. I know right now he's kind of doing the pseudo heel thing or whatever, so it's okay. Swerve's promos are still, they meander a lot. He's not really getting to a point. And then Joe picks up the mic and he's like, both of you are going down at Revolution, bam. And it's just like, yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, no nonsense. Enough, you guys, enough pussyfooting around this. Come Sunday, you guys are both going to lose. Bam. And that's it. And that's all Joe has to say. And everyone's just like,
cheer for that guy.
Right.
When the essence of his promos are, you two crybabies are busy crying, but I'm just going to beat the shit out of both of you and I'm going to keep this up.
Right.
Like that. And obviously he comes off cooler than these other two guys.
Because Swerve's, very meandering and he's kind of like, he's going up and he's going down. He's going.
You know what the problem is?
He's doing these soliloquies and it's like, get it out, man. Get it out.
Yeah.
Let's go.
And he's just not as authentic as Joe. He doesn't come comes across as more Swerve still comes across like he's doing this character. Joe doesn't come across that way. Joe comes across like just the realest dude in the room. So that's a problem too. So this is not the time for Swerve to win. I think it'll be a mistake. I could buy a Hangman win. I can. Look, as good as Samoa Joe is, he's not a needle mover at this stage of his career. He's not a guy who's. But I'll tell you what, though, the Dynamite ratings have been pretty good lately.
They've been pretty solid. Yeah.
I'll tell you what, and the secondary shows when the schedule's not getting all fucked up have had some good weeks too. So, listen, getting back to what AEW meat and potatoes, fucking what they do, has kind of given them a little more momentum here. And obviously the Greensboro show's selling 1 million tickets and everything else. But I could buy a Hangman win for the sake of the story with Swerve. I can buy Samoa Joe retaining, but the one thing I don't want to see here is Swerve win the title yet.
We'll move on to Orange Cassidy versus Roderick Strong for the AEW International title. I have a feeling this will be a pretty good match. I can't say that I'm super excited about it. I haven't really loved a lot of the undisputed whatever the fucks are ice cold right now. So I think maybe it's a good idea to move this title to Roderick to try to give them some juice while MJF is still gone and they're just kind of fucking around on the undercard or in the mid-card or whatever. But I think I feel like that's the direction you have to go, but I don't know, man. It's I kind of just want to pretend that the undisputed thing doesn't exist and just move on without them. But Roderick's too good, and I think it's probably time for Cassidy to lose that title and move on to something else. But that's when I set it all in, and then he just won the title back a couple weeks later. So I don't know what their long-term plan is with Orange Cassidy. If I had a better idea of what their long-term plan was for Orange Cassidy, I'd definitively say, hey, give Roderick Strong this title, let them go run off with it. But without knowing what the hell is next for Orange Cassidy, I'm a little worried about him losing this title too. So this is kind of a toss-up for me. This is 50-50. I could go either way.
There is no plan for Orange Cassidy. If they had any plans for Orange Cassidy, they had an opportunity when he lost the title to Moxley to lose up, and they chose not to take it. This is who he is. This is his slot, and it will always be his slot. This match isn't about Orange Cassidy. I'm telling you right now, Roderick Strong needs to win this match 100%, and the Wardlaw has to win that scramble match 100%. This Undisputed Kingdom shit.
They are ice cold.
They are ice cold. They have to win, both of those matches. Otherwise, it's obvious to me that they don't care about this group. And the problem with that is you can't just then automatically heat them up when MJF shows up again. You have to give these guys some momentum, and they have none. And the only times that we've really seen them wrestle, they've been losing. And I know it's the Kingdom. I know it's been Mike Bennett and Taven that are doing the losing, and that's fine. But this is Roddy and Wardlaw. They must win. Roddy has to win this title. You got to put some gold. So these guys have to come out with some titles, and the other guys have the ROH tag titles. And the Wardlaw has to win that scramble match. He's been talking about coming after Samoa Joe, and that scramble match is for a title shot. And we all think Joe is probably going to retain. Wardlaw has to win, period. Roderick Strong has to win, period. Those are the only booking moves that make sense here. And if that's not what they do, I'm going to come on here on Sunday night and I'm going to bury any result that runs counter to that. It just has to be.
Right, because that they're dying on the vine.
Frozen.
They're dying on the vine. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's rough. Yeah, they came out the other day. I forget what show I was watching. I was just like, holy crap, this unit is fucking terrible. I think it was Mike Bennett. What was the match? It was Mike Bennett and who did he wrestle?
Either the Bennett versus Orange Cassidy.
Yeah, maybe it was. Oh yeah, Bennett versus Orange Cassidy. I'm just like, yeah, these dudes, they came out to crickets. I mean, nobody booed, nobody cared. I was just
it didn't help that the match wasn't any good. Now Taven had a great match.
Taven had a great match. Yes.
Yeah, the Bennett match was a nothing match. And we've seen Orange Cassidy do this thing where he defends the belt. Look, that was his deal and it was great. He had a great year.
But we did that. We told that story already.
We did that. We told that story. I don't know what the fuck was supposed to happen with Moxley, but obviously all that got fucked up. I don't even know if Cassidy, I don't even know if we're supposed to be here, but we're here. But Roderick Strong has to fucking win. You can't beat him in this match. You just can't.
And then move on to the women's title match here. Toni Storm versus Deonna Purrazzo. I am not looking forward to this match at all. Purrazzo's output has not been very good on AEW. I think the Toni, obviously time is Toni. I'm well documented. I hate the character. It makes her matches worse. She hasn't really had a good match since the Timeless Toni thing. So I don't know that. I mean, hopefully they over deliver. I hope they do. But the fact that Purrazzo's had a lot of not very good matches in AEW so far, and Timeless Toni's yet to have a good match in that gimmick, does not have me very ambitious or very very confident of what we're going to see on Sunday.
Timeless Toni sucks, but there is an audience for it. I believe it won Best Gimmick in The Observer. I believe it won Best Gimmick in the Fightful Things. So there's a segment of the fan base who enjoys it. I think it sucks. I think
people are dumb. Those people are dumb. That gimmick stinks.
Well, yeah. All right, you're not going to be as diplomatic as me, okay? But no, look, it's a mid-card gimmick. It's and I would prefer if the eventual story that they tell with Mariah May, the All About Eve deal that they're doing, didn't revolve around the title, and they just kind of did that story as a mid-card story. But unfortunately, I think it has to involve the title in order to tell the story properly, right? Because she has to come for her title. That's kind of like coming for her role. If this was if this was Hollywood, real Hollywood, you know what I mean? That would be the essence of the story. She has to be coming for something, and that something is the title, which fucking sucks because you've got this women's division with Monet coming in and maybe fucking Camille Brick and Serena Deeb getting a new push and all these new people coming into this division, and the title is all wrapped up in this cartoon. But there is an audience for it. I know it's divisive, got a lot of votes for worst gimmick too. But unfortunately it's something there. If you don't like it, you got to live with it. I think she's going to retain because I think that the story with Mariah May necessitates her having the title, unfortunately.
Right.
It feels weird to beat Peraza in this spot because if this were traditional pro wrestling booking without the Mariah May thing hanging over it, Peraza would win. Right. So I don't know where that leaves her by not winning. And I don't know how you involve someone like Monet. You have to leave her out of the title scene. And look, this Toni Storm thing has become a burden.
Right. It's a total burden on the women's division. What would be great is if Mariah May tries to help her, she fucks up, Peraza wins, and then Toni and Mariah can have their little dumb feud away from the title. And then he said, Peraza's there and Monet comes out, and then you have Peraza and Monet as your first money, big thing. And then maybe Hater's back soon or something. Because you said it's just this fucking anchor on the entire division that you got. Woman who says things funny, ha ha ha, is the main, and it's just like, again, I'm not going to be down with a gimmick that makes somebody a worse wrestler, and she's significantly worse as timeless Toni than she was as Toni Storm because she's playing to the gimmick and playing to the character, whatever. But yeah, it's this total cartoon thing that not a lot of other people can exist in her universe because she's such a fucking cartoon. Right. So Peraza can because they actually have like a history and a background or whatever. But you can't have Monet come in and deal with this shit. Like, are you kidding me?
What's scary is Tony might see that, no pun intended, as a money feud because he loves the Toni Storm gimmick.
Yeah,
he loves it.
He's yeah. I don't know. It's
so to me, like you said, it's an anchor on the whole division.
Then a match that I am positive I'm gonna fucking love: Eddie Kingston versus Bryan Danielson for this Triple Crown thing. Just what more do you want than this? It's gonna fucking rock. Bryan Danielson doesn't miss. Yeah. Eddie Kingston rarely misses in big spots like this. This is going to fucking rock.
Well, he won't miss with Danielson. I mean, Kingston is apt to miss from time to time.
He ain't missing in this spot, and he's not missing against Bryan Danielson.
When he has an off night. Yeah, he's not missing in this one against Bryan. Danielson won't allow that. Now, Kingston has to win. Danielson just beat him in the trios match. That's just old school classic booking where the heel title challenger gets the better of the babyface champion on TV on the go home. That's your tip off that the babyface is winning. He should win anyway. It's Danielson's last year as a full-time wrestler. They're doing the stipulation where he has to acknowledge him and shake his hand, right? And respect him and all that. So it's like, Kingston's going to win. He has to win.
Well, I was going to say, we love you. We've talked a lot about how the best Eddie Kingston is the tortured, miserable Eddie Kingston.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be the worst thing ever to have Bryan Danielson beat him.
If you're keeping the feud going.
Right.
That can't be the blow-off.
Oh, no, of course
That's
not.
The thing.
Yeah, it can't be the blow-off.
If this is the blow-off, Kingston has to win. And I assume it's the blow-off, but you might be right. Maybe Danielson wins the Triple Crown, and then Kingston, they build to Kingston winning it back in fucking in fucking
Arthur
Queens
Ashe or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. That's possible. You notice how every year people fantasy book Kingston doing something big at Arthur Ashe?
It never happens.
Like he's fucking Tom Seaver, like he's some icon in Queens, New York. It's like he isn't really, to be honest. He's not even from Queens, right? Like that's not even his thing. Like,
no, he's not. Yeah, he's not from
Queens. From a different borough. Like it's not even like
close enough. Yeah, close enough. Some Yonkers. It's close, right?
Jeez,
I don't know.
Not Ed Kranepool. Let's pump the brakes on being a Queens, New York legend. But yeah. So it all depends whether they're gonna keep this thing going or not. Everybody feverishly Googling Ed Kranepool. Yeah, go ahead,
I have no idea. I didn't even bother. I'm just like, whatever. I don't care. Who is Ed Kranepool?
The Mets legend.
Ed Kranepool. I don't know if I know Ed Kranepool.
You know Ed Kranepool?
I know Tom Seaver. You got me with Tom Seaver, but I don't know.
Yeah, I said
everybody
Seaver,
should
but I
know
was
Tom
mad
Seaver. Yeah.
The problem was I was mad at myself for not going deep enough, so I had to think of another one. I went with Ed Kranepool.
Ed Kranepool. All right, yeah.
Yeah, World Series champion Ed Kranepool. He was on the 60-19 team. Okay. Come on, man. Legendary. Played like 20 years at the Mets. Don't make me explain my bits.
No. You're good. You're good. I'm not explaining. We're done.
You just got to let it hang so people make fun of me in the Discord. Yeah, so anyway, should be great, though, for sure. The next one should be great, too. But, look, I think Takeshita Ospreay is going to have a gimmick finish, and I think people need to be ready for that. Because They're going to tell a
and it's
story
going to
at the
involve
end of
Don
this.
Callis, which is going to make a lot of people piss their pants. So,
Yeah, because you got to get. I think you have to get Will Ospreay out of that group immediately, especially with the reception he got last night.
oh, Wednesday was the tip off of him doing that promo. Everybody cheering him looking around, him looking at Callis, him looking around. It's over. That we're done. We got to be done right away.
I mean, you got to do it now because the fans want him to be a babyface. They want to like him. And it's always been awkward that he's in that group. It has never made sense. I buried it from the start, even with the Jericho match at All In. He doesn't belong with those guys. He needs to be a babyface. This is awkward. I think this match is clearly designed just to immediately tie up that storyline and get Will Ospreay away from the Don Callis family. So, unfortunately, that means you're not going to get a clean finish. Now, are they going to go out there and have a great match? Listen, Will Ospreay is incapable of not having great matches in a singles environment in a big spot. You put him in there with another top 10 worker in the world, it's impossible that the match won't be great.
Oh, no, it's going
if
to be
they
fucking
want
phenomenal.
it to be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they want it to be great, it's going to be great. End of story. But I think people need to prepare themselves. You're not getting a clean finish here. You're getting a finish either, they're going to either cheat Ospreay out of the win, or he's going to, overcome some Don Callis bullshit. But Don Callis is going to be up to something because you got to get Will Ospreay. Will Ospreay, look, these fans want him to be a babyface, and this company needs a big-time babyface.
They need
one.
a babyface. Yeah, they have Samoa Joe's their top babyface, and he's like...
Is he a babyface?
He's like a heel-leaning... Yeah, he's very heel-leaning, and he's a babyface only because he just doesn't fuck around and just set... You know what I mean? Like, he just gets right to the point, and that's what... babyfaces him, but he's not like he is, but he's not, if that makes sense. He is a babyface, but he's not a babyface, and he's not. Yeah, you need a very clear, everybody's in on this guy's a babyface, good guy.
Even Swerve has shades of gray.
Right.
MJF will come back and he'll be a babyface, but he's better suited as a heel. But he has to be a babyface when he faces Cole. And Omega's out injured with the diverculitis. Who knows what's going to happen there? I mean, the move is Will Ospreay, babyface. Don't fuck around. Just do that on this show.
And then Christian Cage, Daniel Garcia for the TNT title. A lot of people want Garcia to win the title here, and I don't know. I think that's because I think you can do the Copeland Cage thing without the title as well. So maybe you have a situation where Copeland comes in and helps Garcia, something like that. Do you think Garcia has enough momentum going right now where he should win this title? Because I kind of think he's right there. I don't know if he's there yet. I don't know if he's there yet.
I think Copeland needs to be Cage for the title, and they're going to Canada soon. Mm-hmm. So you're right that it probably doesn't need it, but I don't actually. You know what? I don't know if I agree with that because the way Cage got it back from Copeland,
that is a central part of their story. So they probably
that's a central part of the story, and you're kind of neutering that part of the story. So I think Cage should and will retain, and then I think Copeland is the one that needs to beat him for it, and you have an opportunity to do it somewhere in Canada coming up. And Garcia, I don't worry about him at all. I know he loses a lot, but I think his push is going just fine. He's getting over.
He's very much, he's getting over a lot.
And I know that Tony Khan loves him, so it's not like they're going to lose interest in pushing him. That's not going to happen. I am not worried about Daniel Garcia at all. He's going to be just fine. I don't think there's no danger of him leaving the company. And if he is in the company, there's no danger of him not being pushed at some point, and he's getting over. Okay? There is a point where you can beat someone too much. I don't think he's there. Losing all those Continental Classic matches, I'm telling you right now, that's planting seeds. He will win that tournament one day. Daniel Garcia is going to win a Continental Classic. Is he going to win this year's? I don't know. Probably not. Is he going to win one? Yes, he will. That's why he lost all those matches last year. I'm telling you right now, don't worry about his push. I am confident he's going to be or get a chance to be a player. Will the fans take to him at that level? I don't know. Probably not now, but what is he, fucking 22? Who cares?
He's still stupid young. I think people people think he's like 32 years old. The guy is 25. He's 25. He's still very, very
25.
young.
It's like, I talked about this with Nick Wayne. Nick Wayne is 18.
Right.
And I see people like,
oh, they're ruining Nick Wayne. Oh, they're
not even that, like critical of his work. And it's like,
oh, yeah. What were you doing at 18? What were you doing at 18? Yeah.
In a decade, he's still going to be 28.
Right.
in 2034. He's going to, in 2036, which sounds like the fucking Jetsons, he's going to be the same age that Will Ospreay is right now. Don't worry about Nick Wayne. Nick Wayne doesn't have to win a match for 5 fucking years. It doesn't matter. He's again, they're doing great with him too. Getting to work heel a little bit. You know, it's just exposure at this point for guys like this. You're in no rush to start pulling triggers. Okay? Nick Wayne has between now and 2036 to have Will Ospreay's entire career that Will Ospreay has had to this point.
Right.
Think about it that way. And Garcia's fucking 25. Now, look, eventually you got to flip the switch if you believe in him, and I think it has to come soon. I don't think it has to come in this match on Sunday, no.
Then tag match that I'm very much looking forward to, FTR versus Blackpool Combat Club. Claudio and Moxley, obviously Cash and Dax, so that should be phenomenal. I think this show, there's some stuff that I don't love about the show. Obviously, the women's match, like I said, I'm kind of down on. I don't love the three-way, even though I think the three-way is going to probably turn out pretty good. But, man, when you have matches like this, FTR versus Blackpool Combat Club, I mean, the matches they've had on Dynamite have been phenomenal, and I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to go out here and tear the house down again, too. So I'm very much looking forward to this.
And they clearly held back 2 weeks ago in the first match.
Oh, yeah. You could sense that, like, as the match is happening, you're like, oh, they're going to do this again, and it's going to be better than this. That's when I was watching the match, that's the exact thought I had every single, when the match ended, I was like, yeah, they have a so much better match in them, and I can't wait to see it in a couple weeks. And here we are at Revolution. And then All-Star 8-man scramble. The Meat Madness has been discontinued, stopped, paused, whatever. And now we have an 8-man scramble. Chris Jericho, Lance Archer, Brian Cage, Powerhouse Hobbs, Wardlow, Hook. And since it's a scramble, I'm guessing Marcus Mathers, Dylan McKay, Jordan Oliver, right? It's a scramble, right? You got to have,
You've been waiting all week to fire that one off.
I have.
Now it's Magnus beat Matt Sydal, and I thought Jericho was the other mystery guy.
I think there's another mystery guy other than Jericho. I got Jericho, Archer, Cage, Hobbs, Wardlow, and Hook. But I haven't looked at the spoilers, so I don't.
Well, Magnus is definitely in it because he wins the match on Rampage, so they got a CMLL guy in there, and I don't know if they're going to add someone.
Yeah.
else.
By the way, for people that are like, wait a minute, no, not Nick Aldis. Nick Aldis is not all elite. He didn't turn in his SmackDown general manager role or whatever he is.
Oh no, watch the product.
Yeah,
watch
not that Magnus, folks. Yeah,
watch the product. But yeah, I thought the other mystery guy, Jericho, fills the other role on the other, because it's all taped already, all this shit. But anyway, the point is Wardlow has to win. I mean, let's not overthink this either. I don't like Wardlow. I mean, I saw someone in the chat earlier when I was comparing Wardlow MJF to Virgil Ted DiBiase. You're like, who's the better worker, Wardlow or Virgil? And
yeah, I mean, I think Wardlow, but it's not.
They're joking, but I had to think about it.
It's not that far. It's Wardlow, but it's
it's closer than you think.
It's a conversation. Yeah, Dante Martin is the other mystery guy that's in the match.
Who is it?
Dante Martin.
Oh, Dante Martin got in. Okay. Yeah, because they couldn't put Pentagon in it because Magnus.
Right.
And by the way, Dave Meltzer was right about that. I don't know if people read my thing behind the paper, but Dave was right about that. I know that it's advantageous.
There's no way. Egads, you're wrong.
I know it's advantageous for some people to say that Dave is wrong for business reasons and things like that. And technically he worded it poorly because that's what Dave does. He words things poorly, and that's on him. He causes his own misery a lot of the time. I talk to people who know, and I wrote about it a couple weeks ago. It's on the $5 tier when it comes to that. Is there some set in stone rule of law that the CMLL guys can't be on the same show as AAA guys? No. But is AEW respecting that CMLL doesn't want their guys on the same shows as the AAA guys? Yes, they are. Yes, absolutely. It's a real thing. And it isn't happening. And CMLL doesn't consider Dynamite, Rampage, and Collision to be the same show, even if they're taped on the same night. If that doesn't make sense to you, ask CMLL. Don't ask me. But that they don't consider, because they consider the same TV shows to be the same shows. So, I saw some people saying last night because Pentagon taped a match after Atlantis Jr. wrestled a match, but Dynamite and Collision aren't considered the same thing to CMLL.
Right.
Okay, that's
two separate
that's
shows.
The difference. Two separate shows in their eyes, and AEW and Tony, they're just being. It's a new relationship. They're walking on eggshells a little, and look, Tony would love to be able to book whatever he wants, but he has to gain the trust of CMLL first, and that's a very hard thing to do. You know, they're isolationists. They do business with New Japan and no one else. They're a little finicky. They have their political, and you have to respect that shit. That's all. So, Dave wasn't wrong about that. He wasn't.
No, it's not new news either. Like, we all knew this.
It's not new.
People have known about this
fucking
for a
news.
decade, that this has been going on. 2 decades. People know about this. Anybody that's been in the wrestling business for more than 10 minutes knows the score here about CML and AAA and the rules that you have to play around. Talk to any promoter that's ever promoted wrestling and every major. I mean, yeah, this is. I was blown away that became a story, and it's like, didn't we all know this forever? But we got to dunk on Dave for engagement. Yeah, we got to dunk on Dave for engagement. So I get it, but
and it's not even just that. I'm not going to say too much, but we know why it became a story, because it was an opportunity for, we know why. But he's not wrong. But he did word it poorly and worded it wrong.
Right, as he's wont to do.
And look, if they're situated, they don't want them appearing on the same shows. Okay, and it's like, if there's a situation where Commander accidentally appears on a show that a CMLO guy appears on, even if it's not wrestling, because they don't want them wrestling on the same shows. Like, CMLO's not thrilled about that. But Tony can talk his way out of that. You know what I mean? It's like, again, it's not rule of law. There can be slip-ups, and it can be, it's not like if two of these guys appear on the same show, Tony's going to jail or CMLL is going to stop doing business with him.
Right.
People just are too literal. They're too literal. But the base of it is true, that they don't want their guys wrestling on the same show as AAA guys.
Right.
And like you said, this is...
And it's been going on forever. And one thing that Tony's doing that a lot, because I've seen a lot of people be like critical of AEW and like, oh, come on, I can't believe, AEW would do, not going to book Mexican guy. It's not AEW. AEW is doing better than most other companies ever, because most other companies say, all right, you know what, we don't want to deal with this shit, so we're just going to work with AAA. We're never going to book any of the CML guys. We're just going to work with AAA. Or the flip side, New Japan Pro Wrestling. We're only going to work with CML. We're never going to book any AAA guys. So he's one of the few guys that's trying to work with both of these companies, but also respecting what both companies want out of their relationships and what both companies want to do in relation to the other, major Mexican wrestling promotion. So it's very difficult. You got to walk on eggshells. And a lot of promoters have walked on eggshells, and a lot of promoters have just said, fuck it, I don't want to deal with this shit. I'm just going to book one or the other. Tony's one of the rare ones that's tried to book both of them, but then you got to kind of dance around this thing and walk on eggshells and be very deliberate about who appears where and how they appear and all that sort of stuff. But this, again, this has been going on for decades. So I was blown away that it became a story, but of course it became a story because, for all the reasons we just talked about. All right.
Anyway, so that's I'm sure they'll announce some stuff for the pre-show. And how many matches we have? 1, 2, 3, 4,
yeah, there's going to be something.
7, 8, 9. They could add to the main show.
Yeah, we'll get some Willow thing on the pre-show or something. I'm sure we'll get something like that. Sky Blue's got to find a way in there.
Scissor Gang or something.
Yeah.
Bang, Scissor Gang.
Yeah.
So that's Revolution. Let's squeeze in one more quickie before we turn to the Overrun. Let's do this Maxxine Duprigate very quick.
Okay.
Because I don't think we're going to be debating this. As I'm sure most people know by now, a fan, by the way, posted like a 11-second clip of fans booing Maxxine Dupree at a house show, and one fan yelling, "You suck, don't come back." And this fan was outraged that, that this is verbal abuse, people are saying, and she's a rookie trying her best, and this was totally out of line. And then, of course, Rhea Ripley has to jump in and stir the pot by agreeing with those sentiments. Obviously, people can probably figure out what we're going to say. It's utterly...
it's not hard to figure out.
It's utterly fucking ridiculous.
Our stats on
Rich,
this.
let me ask you a couple questions.
So real quickly, here's the tweet. Again, it's 11 seconds or whatever. The tweet says, "This poor girl is getting booed at a house show for trying to get better. Wrestling fans suck." And Rhea Ripley quote tweeted that by saying, "I really wish that some of you got booed and ridiculed in the public eye while being new at your job. Learning and getting better is all a part of being human. Be better as humans."
Yeah. So I don't have a problem with the fan because fans are fans, and it could be a kid, and the fan is just dopey, and who cares? It's just a fan, and the fan is obviously wrong. But the fan's heart, I guess, is in the right place, but the fan's wrong.
The fan also has a Maxxine Duprigate profile picture, so I think that probably plays a little bit in it as well. I'm not going to.
The problem here is Rhea Ripley's false equivalency of, well, nobody abuses you at your job. Well, we're not public performers. Well, we are, but most people aren't public performers, Rhea. So you're way off base here. You're totally out of line. You are a public performer, and unfortunately, look, Rich. Did this fan who yelled, "You suck, don't come back," did they use profanity? Rich?
No.
Did they use profanity?
They did not.
Did they say anything offensive to Maxxine?
No, I mean, you could say, "Boo, you suck, don't come back" is offensive. I would disagree.
When I say offensive, I'm talking about something sexist, racist. That's what I mean when I say offensive. Was there anything in that sort of direction? So what the fuck is the problem here? I mean, this is utterly ridiculous that this has even become a discussion point. And again, I don't necessarily blame the fan. Fans can say whatever they want. And actually, that's the whole basis of this. I'm defending the fans saying whatever they want in that arena to Maxxine Duprigate.
Yeah, within reason, obviously. Not
no
offensive,
profanity,
sexist.
nothing offensive.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like "you suck" is the most common boilerplate thing that fans will say at sporting event. You go to any sporting event in the world, and you will hear "you suck" countless times during the course of that event. That's not something over the line or offensive. And the "don't come back" part, so what? It's pro wrestling. You pick the people you like, pick your people you don't. You cheer the ones you like, you boo the ones you don't, and you say things like "you suck, don't come back." It just sounded like a fan having fun at a show. You could hear another fan chuckling. And this idea that they were disrespectful to this poor rookie. When she turned around and put her hand up to the crowd, a lot of people were booing. Half the crowd cheered her. Half the crowd cheered her. The other half booed her. That's a performance. That's sports. Pro wrestling, the basis of pro wrestling is an interactive event with fans. They're going to like some people, they're not going to like some people. And as long as fans aren't crossing any lines, which these fans did not, let me put it to you this way. If you think "you suck, don't come back" is verbal abuse, you're out of your fucking mind. I'm sorry. There's no debate to be had. There's no middle ground. You are out of your fucking mind if you think that constitutes verbal abuse. It doesn't. It's common boilerplate heckling that you'll get at any sporting event. In fact, it's rather tame, if I'm being honest. It's tame. That's tame heckling. And, Maxxine Duprigate herself hasn't complained.
She hasn't said a thing. Yeah, I kind of do feel bad. I do wonder if she doesn't even want to be involved in all this and somehow has gotten involved in all this. It's probably pretty embarrassing for her, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's as many have stated, the fact that she's a rookie and has only had 13 matches, that's the company's fault.
Yeah, it's not my fucking problem. I'm sorry.
And it's not your problem as a paying ticket buyer. And again, you as a fan, you can boo and cheer or whoever you want, as long as you're not being offensive, which this was not. This was nowhere close to being offensive. Okay? Maybe this one fan in this random 12-second clip was a fan of the opponent and was having fun at a wrestling show.
Right. She was facing Nia Jax, and I believe it was somewhere in California, Nia Jax's front. So maybe you were just thinking, hey.
Nia Jax happens to be very fucking over right now with the WWE fan base.
Right.
There's like this Nia Jax, they think she's doing phenomenal work.
Yeah.
I think it's telling that people assumed it was because Dupree sucked. When it very easily could have been someone who likes Nia Jax heckling her opponent in a very tame way.
Ole Anderson got stabbed by a guy, by the way. It's like the fact that in the very same show that we're talking about Ole Anderson, who was stabbed multiple times by a guy and needed serious medical attention, and the guy was convicted of an assault with a knife. On the same episode, we've now moved 30 years later in pro wrestling, and boo, you suck, and now we're getting tisk-tisked by wrestlers because you have to be nice to the woman who's trying to learn how to wrestle. It's like so demeaning. And that's Jesse Collins wrote a very good piece for us at Voices of Wrestling talking about what I think needs to get talked a little bit. And I saw Hyon, because there was a bunch of people doing like, what annoys you about today's wrestling or whatever. And Hyon, who we've talked about a lot, a women's pro wrestler, she's based out of Texas right now, kind of straight up said, like, we kind of treat women's wrestling with kid gloves right now. We don't have to. It makes it all worse, and it makes it all very demeaning. It all comes across very demeaning that we can't criticize women's wrestling. We can't criticize, and like you said, it's always done with this veil of we're immediately assuming that they're booing because Maxxine Duprigate isn't good at wrestling. And we are assuming that Maxxine Duprigate just can't handle being booed. Oh, my God. Her feeble little mind is just going to explode at the idea of her getting booed. She hasn't said a thing, by the way. She hasn't said a thing about this. But it's all this very demeaning, white knighting, strange thing that we present as, oh, you need to be nice because they can't, oh, you just have to be nice. And it comes across very demeaning as in, oh, you got to be nice to these women because they can't handle it type of thing. That's how I read it a lot of times when it's like, no, just tell her she sucks. It's fine. It's okay. She's a big girl. She'll figure it out. It either bothers her or it doesn't bother her. She's a performer on national television. She works for the largest wrestling company in the world. If she didn't want to get booed at her job, she'd take an office job. She can come work at my office. I don't get booed at my office. I'll tell you that. I get booed here because I decide every week to come onto a wrestling thing and do this little podcast, and people talk shit about us all the time. If I just wanted
part of it.
That's part of it. If I wanted to avoid that, I would just stop doing this podcast and go back to my office job where nobody boos me at my office and nobody says shit about me at my office.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And if Maxxine Duprigate or anybody else can't handle being heckled or booed or criticized for their performance, they need to find another line of work.
Right.
I know that sounds harsh, but it's the truth.
And again, she hasn't said anything. So one of these things that comes across so, white knighty, demeaning, whatever you want to say, it just comes across like
we have to protect this.
Yes. Oh my God, she must be protected at all costs.
Flower of a woman. It's like in that aspect of it. And this nonsense I've been seeing where now look, is there a sexist aspect to this sometimes? Of course. Let's be real here. Okay. Of course, there are people who are going to be harder on the women's wrestlers than men's wrestlers in these scenarios. But I've been seeing this. People say that, oh, you never see men get treated this way. Are you out of your fucking mind?
Ole Anderson got stabbed.
How about in this how about chanting "Die Rocky Die" at Rocky Maivia when he was a babyface? How about John Cena for a decade getting booed out of any building he came into? And it wasn't fans playing along with the show like they do with Dominic. They hated that motherfucker. And they sang along to his theme song, John Cena sucks. John Cena sucks.
I have been in the crowd where some vile things were said about John Cena and to John Cena. Yes.
There's countless examples. I went to a Ring of Honor show in Hammerstein Ballroom where Pac wrestled so poorly that the fans were chanting, please, don't come back, and booed him out of the fucking building. And guess what? Gabe never brought him back because he was so horrid. And his career has worked out just fine. How has Pac's career turned out? After we all chanted, don't come back at him at Hammerstein Ballroom because he was slipping off the top rope and stunk the joint up. That's part of being a public performer. And if you can't hack it, get out. And there's no indication she can't hack it. She hasn't complained.
Right.
I don't know what the fuck she thinks about it. She might be laughing it off. She knows she's inexperienced. Get on the company for putting her out there. That's who you need to get on. Not the fans for booing a poor performance when they paid who knows how much money to go watch.
I think people did it, and they looked at the average ticket price was about $65 to go to that show.
I mean, there's a level of competency you expect from the self-professed and what realistically is the top wrestling promotion in the world.
Right. If you want to go to your local indie and pay $5 to get in, and some guy comes out and it's the second match ever, maybe you don't need to be telling this man or woman or whatever. Yeah, you can lay off that guy. Yeah. It's $5. The dude is not getting paid. The people are here just to try to learn. Like, that's a whole different animal than paying $65 to go to a major basketball arena in a town and watch the top wrestling company in the world and a performer wrestle for that company. No, that's fair game. I'm sorry, that's fair game.
And again, I don't want to derail the point because I think it's okay to boost someone for stinking the joint up. Don't make no mistake. I think that's fine. There is no indication in that 12-second clip that guy said, "You suck, don't come back," because she sucked in the match. There's no indication of that. I don't know why he was saying it. Maybe
Right.
he likes Nia Jax better.
Right. I mean,
don't
she probably
fucking know.
did. She's not very good, but, you know, I don't know. We don't know that.
And it seemed lighthearted to me, like someone else was chuckling. It seemed like people having fun at a wrestling show, booing someone they don't like. For whatever reason, they fucking feel like not liking them. Okay? If it was because she wasn't any good, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. We cannot possibly be going down. There's just
I
this
can't
new
go down this path.
breed.
This path can't happen.
We can't go down this path. There's just this new breed of fucking fan, and it's that company specifically that I don't understand these fucking, and we cannot allow this. And I think it's the company's fault. They've taught their fans that it's not a wrestling show. This is a highly overproduced television show where we want you to react a certain way. We will pump in the boos and cheers to help guide you. And everyone's trying their best and react the way we want. This is how, and this
Fuck
is
that.
the fans that they're breeding
this,
because
yeah.
of it. These are the fans that they're breeding. These people who don't see it as what it is, a simulated sports event, which for its entire history, one of the most important aspects of it was the fan emotion and interaction. Fans reacting like it's an actual sporting event. And if you don't want to talk about, if you want to sit here and claim wrestling isn't sport, I mean, you're wrong, because the fan reaction to wrestling, even though it's worked, is the same as you would, and that's the reactions they want. Bands get booed off the stages. I've been to music festivals and have seen bands get booed off the stage where they couldn't finish their set. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've been in crowds that have done it. Where the band fucking stinks. They're terrible, and they get booed off the stage. Comics. A lot of people don't notice. I go to a lot of comedy shows.
Notorious
I've seen
heckled.
Bands, comics bomb. They get heckled. They get booed. Okay? That's part of being a public performer. That's part of being a public performer. And pro wrestling is no different than that, or sports. You go to a baseball game, you sit in the outfield, and you want verbal abuse. You want to talk about verbal abuse?
Oh my God! Sit in the outfield of any Major
You're
League
sitting
Baseball
outfield
game.
of any Major League Baseball team, and listen to what they yell at the opposing outfielders all game long. That's verbal abuse. Okay? You suck, don't come back is boilerplate, basic ass heckling. And it sounded like that guy did it with a smile on his face. He's having fun at a wrestling show. I mean, geez, we can't seriously be going down this road. And Rhea Ripley is completely out of line. She is completely out of line. It's part of the job. Just like in our small little way, like Rich said, we're going to put this podcast out, and like has happened every week for 12 years, people are going to fucking shit on it and tell us we're wrong and how much we suck and how our opinions are terrible and how the show stinks and in some cases, how they want us to be dead. That's what we get every week for 12 years. Okay? And like Rich said, if that's too much for me, I'll stop doing the fucking show. Grow up, Rhea Ripley. Grow up. I didn't think this was going to fire me up. I thought we were going to have fun with this, but it's ridiculous.
It's bad.
You know,
it's a bad path to go down. It's a terrible path to go
it's
down.
a horrible
We can't
path.
go down.
I'm watching this debate happen, and I'm thinking, it's like it was distressing to me. I think it's toxic. It's a toxic attitude to have where you can't be critical. Even in a fun, lighthearted way. You can't go to a wrestling show and shit on the people you don't like. That's preposterous.
We can shit on Dominic because they told you can shit on Dominic. But everybody else you have to be nice to.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And I could give you a million historical examples. A million of them. I mean, fuck, that's the lifeblood of what pro wrestling is. It's really, it's unbelievable. I can't even. I couldn't believe my eyes that this was
Right.
a real thing.
Well, and like
When
you said,
it
it was
first
getting
started, I
piggybacked
was
off
like-
of a lot of WWE, a lot of like Zelina Vega jumped in, Rhea Ripley jumped in. It was all people in that company, and it's just like, fuck, we cannot be telling the fans that this is the way that you need it. When you come to a wrestling show, you must be respectful because this whittle girl is trying to learn how to become a wrestler. It's like, what are we doing? Come on.
It's condescending to her.
Yes, very condescending to her.
That's your point. This is so condescending to the performers. So for other wrestlers to be like jumping in and agreeing,
Be
with this
nice.
is
She's
ridiculous.
trying to learn like she's an 11-year-old playing t-ball. It's
Well,
like
no, to tell the company to have her learn behind closed doors or on small shows on the Largo Loop where she belongs then.
Or hey, Rhea, you want to go work with her on the house shows then? Get her in the ring for 25 minutes at all your house shows and teach her how to work then if she's just trying to learn and we have to be nice to her while she's trying to learn. Like it's
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Would anyone be nice to an NBA player who fucking shoots 1 for 13 getting called up from the G League? No, he get booed out of the fucking building.
Of
and
course he
rightfully
would.
so.
Of course he would.
And that's part of the deal, and everybody knows that. Nothing offensive was said to this person. Not in those 12 seconds we saw. It's utterly and totally preposterous. It's just ridiculous.
It's a bad path.
So
it's not a good
it's
path.
a bad path.
I don't like it.
Bad path. You know, thankfully, I do think most people are on our side of this argument. I do believe that. You know, when I first saw the discussion break out, honestly, I didn't see the clip, and I was like, oh, this is just some dumb WWE fan thing like usual. But then as it grew and Rhea Ripley made the tweet, then I seeked out the clip. And honestly, I thought I was going to hear something heinous. I was prepared to hear the fucking worst. And then when I watched the clip and heard it, I was like, oh, you got to be fucking kidding me. Rich, I thought it was going to be something awful. And it was so tame. It was like nothing. There's nothing in the clip. I had to listen to it like 4 times. I'm like, what the fuck am I missing? You suck? Really? Nope, I wasn't missing anything. I thought there was a longer clip. I'm like, is there a longer clip somewhere? What the fuck am I missing here? This is ridiculous. Utter nonsense. Anyway, that's Maxxine Duprigate. We're way over the time here.
Absolutely. So that we are going to. So for people that are listening on the live show, stick with us. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to go to the bathroom. Joe's going to cough a couple more times. We'll be back in a minute with the. I'm going to cough as well, for the record.
Yeah. So if you're listening live and you want to hear the overrun, stick around. You can hear the overrun live.
It's going to pause. We're gonna mute for a little bit. The video's not going to pause. Nothing else is going to happen. We're going to mute for a little bit. Stick around. We're going to go with the overrun here in a couple of minutes. Now, if you are listening on the free podcast feed, the overrun is going to be available on the $5 tier at flagshippatreon.com. Now, what we're going to cover on that overrun is going to be the CML wrestlers losing their visas, the wrestlers that were affected, how it all happened, how it all went down, a little bit of discussion about Elimination Chamber, a little bit of discussion about the Wrestling Observer Awards, and then New Japan Pro Wrestling, MLW, and I think that's it. Yeah, MLW and New Japan. So that's what's going to be on there. So we're going to get Elimination Chamber, CMLL, Wrestling Observer Awards discussion, MLW, and New Japan is all going to be on the overrun. That's going to be available on our $5 tier over at flagshippatreon.com. So if you're listening live, stick with us while we go away for a little bit, a couple minutes. We'll be back. We'll tell you when the overrun has started, so don't go anywhere. And for those free listeners on the free podcast feed, thank you, of course, for listening to this episode and all episodes of the Flagship Podcast. But make sure you get to that $5 tier for the overrun of all those other discussions. And that's it for us. So that's Joe. I'm Rich, and we will talk to you again next time. Take care. Bye.
Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor.
And I'm Kelly.
And we are the co-hosts of Jumping Bomb Audio, the podcast all about Joshi Pro Wrestling here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. Every other Monday, we are with you talking about the biggest news in Joshi, along with show reviews, previews, and much, much more.
So if you're new to Joshi or you've been a longtime fan, this is the show for you. We've got something for everyone here. So check us out, Jumping Bomb Audio.